This is Audible.
Deadly Ink, a dark mafia romance, Omerta series, Book 3, written by Roxy Sinclaire, narrated by Holly Holt.
What happens in Vegas? Sierra. To never having to take another test for as long as we lived, Kara said, holding her glass of champagne into the air. Well, except for pregnancy and STD tests, Felicity, she added. I giggled as Felicity rolled her eyes and held her glass next to Kara's. We still have to recertify, but whatever, to us. We clinked our glasses together and guzzled down the cold champagne. I was starting to feel a little tipsy. The other two girls, of course, didn't feel a thing. I wasn't as good at drinking as they were. They would always call me a lightweight, which seemed painfully ironic because I had at least 20 pounds on both of them. But when it came to alcohol, I liked to practice moderation. I knew too well what an excess of drink could do to a person. For a nurse, I said to Kara, you're fairly judgmental about other people's sex lives, I joked. Says the prude, she replied, pouring another round. Sierra, if I didn't know any better, I would have guessed that you were a virgin. Me? I squealed. Why? Because you never seem to have any interest in any guy. Meanwhile, Felicity and I are chasing after anyone who looks remotely male. Just for once, I'd like to see you bring someone home for the night. Who knows? I said dreamily. Maybe tonight's the night. They both cackled in response. I felt like I should take offense to the fact that the very thought of me getting with a guy was hilarious. I hope so, Felicity said. This may be our last big vacation together. We can hardly get our shifts to line up, so I can't imagine that we'll ever be able to get an entire week off at the same time. We have to go all out and get all the partying out of our system. Agreed, Kara said solemnly. You guys, we're going to have more opportunities to party, I said. Not like this, Felicity said. That's why you can't let us down, Sierra. Me? I asked. What does this have to do with me? I won't be able to find closure on this stage of my life if I can't see you go completely wild tonight, she answered. I scoffed. I knew that once we really got the party going, they would become too absorbed into their own little worlds to care about what I was doing. We would go to a club, and I'd be sure to lose them both at some point during the night. With Kara, I was likely to find her crying in the bathroom after drinking one too many shots, and Felicity would have her mouth pressed against some stranger's mouth. For as wild as the pair of them could be, they were anything but unpredictable. I told you, Kara said to Felicity. Told her what? I asked. I told her that you would talk a big game about hooking up with guys and having a bunch of drinks, but in the end, you'd come back to the room early to go to bed. What time did you predict she'd be tucked in? 11:30, Felicity answered, looking at her watch. It's already 9, and we haven't even gotten dressed to go out yet, I said defensively. Do you really think I'm going to call it quits after 2.5 hours? They looked at each other and burst into laughter. I was starting to feel like they were ganging up on me. I'm going to prove both of you wrong, I said, standing up from my hotel bed. This is going to be the wildest night of our lives. Felicity cheered as Kara stuck another bottle in the ice bucket. Good, Kara said. Let's get ready to go out. We scurried around the hotel room my dad paid for as a nursing school graduation gift. It was way nicer than anything I could afford, so I was extremely appreciative of it. I was exhausted from all of my studying, and I was excited to blow off a little steam. Kara and Felicity worked together to straighten my long, frizzy hair. I had my parents to thank for my wild Italian hair. My complexion was perfect for sitting around the pool all day, but my wild, uncontrollable hair was a family curse. That, plus my love for big, starchy meals. My blue-eyed, blonde-haired friends never had these problems. You look incredible, Kara gushed once I put on my skin-tight black dress. I placed my hands on my wide hips, hoping the color would at least be slimming. You're absolutely going to get some tonight, Felicity agreed. I had my doubts, but I cleared my belongings from my bed, just in case. If someone happened to come back with me, I wanted to at least be able to pretend I wasn't a huge slob. Once we got ready, it was time to hit the town. Felicity found a nightclub nearby, so we squeezed into the back seat of a cab and sped off into the night. The girls and I danced in the sweltering club until the wee hours of the morning. Sure, I drank more than I usually did on a night out, but nothing really happened on the dance floor. I was really hoping I'd meet a guy to go off with for a little fun, if just to prove to my friends that I wasn't the sad prude. At different times throughout the night, I saw both Kara and Felicity grinding up on good-looking guys. I knew I wasn't stunning like they were, but it would have been nice to be found attractive by someone. I had fun, but eventually I wanted to leave the club. It was just too hot and crowded in there. Of course, I couldn't be the first one to suggest we leave. And thankfully, Kara made the first move. A little after midnight, we made our way out into the cool night air. I was relieved that we had left the club, but I was still feeling like I had missed my chance to make something happen. What now? Felicity asked, taking her heels off on the sidewalk outside the bar. Should we find another club? Kara asked. I grimaced. Can we get a bite to eat first? I asked. I need some time to cool down before I go back in there, I said. That, plus the alcohol in my empty stomach, was a perfect recipe for a disastrous hangover. We found a stand selling French fries and took the takeout box to a park bench. I dug into our late-night snack as I watched girls in tight dresses like mine stumble their way across the street. We were all just trying to do the same thing, have one night so wild that we could go back to our boring lives and still feel satisfied. The guys at the club were kind of cute, right? Felicity asked. Kara chuckled. They were okay at best. I wonder if we just picked the wrong bar. Should we keep going down the street and stop whenever we find something good? No, Felicity said, dropping her fry back into the container. I know exactly what we should do next. I followed her gaze across the street. Now I knew what the strange buzzing sound was. Yes! Kara shrieked. Let's get tattoos! Both of their heads whipped toward me with expectant faces, as if they knew that my reaction was going to prove some point. Sure, I said casually, eating another French fry. Let's do it. Their mouths dropped open. Really? Kara asked. Why not? This is the kind of thing you do when you have a massive party night in Vegas, right? I got up and tossed our empty takeout box in the trash can. Felicity and Kara hesitantly got up after me. Is this really happening? Felicity asked, a look of pure delight on her face. Let's fucking do it, I exclaimed, feeling a wild energy come over me. The three of us linked arms and crossed the street to go to the tattoo parlor, Felicity and Kara gushing over my sudden change of personality. It felt good to let loose for once in my life. I spent so much of my time trying to be responsible and take care of everyone else that I never took the time to relax and think about myself. I was about to start a new and demanding career. I deserved to go wild, even if it was just for one night.
A free man, Apollo. When I stepped into the bare apartment, I flung my bag off my shoulder and let it hit the ground with a thud. This place could be considered a closet, but it would have to do. There weren't many landlords out there who were willing to rent out their property to an ex-convict with no source of income. All I had was the money I was given for taking the fall and going to the clink in the first place. That and the knapsack of whatever possessions I had when I went to prison. I was still incredibly angry about what had happened. No amount of time in prison can take that away. In their attempts to make it seem like we were being rehabilitated in there, the prison brought in speakers to talk about getting our lives back on track once we were released. I was going to get my life back on track, all right, It just wasn't going to be in a way that the Department of Corrections would approve of. There was no one to bring me the justice I deserved. I would have to find it myself. While it was nice to have a place to myself, it still felt incredibly lonely in the one-room apartment. I had nothing here but a mattress on the floor and a wooden dresser that looked like it could fall apart at any time. It hardly mattered, though. This wasn't going to be my permanent home. I would find something better when the time was right. The one place I didn't feel lonely was in the shower, though. After fiddling with the faucet to get a little lukewarm water, I stripped down and enjoyed the privacy of my little mildew-covered shower stall. At least this was all mine. After I dried off, I pulled a fresh outfit from my bag, a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. The biceps that I had worked on in the prison gym bulged from the armholes. I was thankful for that tiny release in prison, where I could work out some of that extra rage that built up inside me. It was either bench press until I couldn't lift my arms, or punch out the next guy who looked at me funny. I wasn't always a violent guy, but there was something about the constant restrictions on my life that drove me a little crazy. It was getting late, but I couldn't stand being in the dingy apartment for longer than absolutely necessary. I walked down the dark stairwell and out onto the street. If I had more options, I would have chosen any other location but here. I liked peace and quiet, not neon lights and drunk people yelling at all hours of the night. Maybe it was because I missed out on this part of my life, but the thought of even going out to party made my head hurt. In my late teens and early 20s, I would have loved this kind of thing. Girls came into the city looking to get wild. Even the city's tourism board encouraged absolute debauchery. Young Apollo would have eaten this shit up. If there was one good thing about living in a place like this, it was that there was no shortage of scantily clad women to ogle at. They traversed the sidewalk in herds, giggling ladies, clutching on to one another. They made my animal instincts kick in. If only I could separate one from the group, then both of us would have a good night. After grabbing a bite to eat, I walked back toward my apartment. On my way, I heard the familiar buzz of a tattoo parlor. Suddenly feeling the urge to check it out, I made a beeline around the corner to check it out. I was usually a little more particular about my tattoos. To stop into a shop that was clearly made for drunk tourists to get a souvenir of their time in Las Vegas, but I was really itching to get inked again. In prison, there is always some guy who swaps his tattoo skills for cigarettes or snacks from the commissary. Sometimes they do really great work. Other times, you'd spot someone walking around with misspelled words on their face and have to stifle your laughter. I wasn't about to take that risk. Strangely enough, out of all the things I missed about the outside world, getting tattoos done was one of them. When I got my first half sleeve at the age of 19, going to my appointments was the thing I looked forward to the most. I loved the smell of disinfectant, the relaxed atmosphere, the mind-quieting buzzing of the needle, and the pain that reminded me that I could feel things. My mother hated my tattoos, but my dad always approved. He had more tattoos than I could count. I think my mom was afraid that I would turn into my father. My father was a good man, but he often found himself in the middle of bad situations. Neither of them wanted that kind of life for me. I didn't have a lot of cash on me, so I would have to get something small. Luckily, the shop wasn't very busy, so they'd be able to get me in a chair within the hour. While I waited, I got out my new phone that I bought on my way to the apartment. With the scrap of paper I brought out of prison with my contacts, I sent a few messages to some guys that promised to help me out. Sure enough, within a few minutes, I got a response from a guy who was just getting out when I came into prison. I didn't know him before we met, but after we spoke for a while, I realized that we were both in jail because of the same person. In fact, there were a lot of people who were not very happy with Giorgio D'Angelo. Giorgio had made a lot of enemies, but no one had the balls to take him down. Those who had tried tended to end up back in prison, or worse, depending on one's view of prison and the length of their sentence. He had caused me and my family a lot of pain, and I couldn't live with the fact that he lived his comfortable life when people like me had to go to prison for nothing. I had to do something about it. I wouldn't say that I was scared, but when I thought about my plan for too long, I started to get a little nervous. Prison was hard, and I was in no way ready to go back again. But I knew that if I slipped up, I would be back, probably for even longer. 5 years was bad enough. I couldn't imagine 10 years or longer. That's why I needed to remember why I was doing this. I had to protect the little people who were stepped on time and time again. I needed to get my life back, to have the freedom to do what I wanted without worrying if I had a hit on me. I wouldn't let some mobster take my life away again. "Apollo Nano," the tattoo artist called. I stood up, my body towering over the frat boys, looking through binders of designs. "Do you know what you want?" she asked. I nodded. I know exactly what I want. "Can't take my eyes off of you, Sierra." After much discussion, the three of us decided to get matching tattoos, a tiny bird on the inside of our wrists. Kara first suggested syringes because of our nursing degrees, but we thought that people would assume that we were linked to drug use or something. Then we tossed around ideas for every other medical-themed imagery, but there was nothing we wanted to permanently ink into our skin. Then we just thought about any generic symbol that could be meaningful to all of us, but still would look cute at the same time. "It's because we're officially adults now that we're done with school," Felicity said, the alcohol making her feel especially sentimental. "We're free to fly away and begin our lives." I laughed, but I still agreed with her thought. Ever since I moved out of my parents' house, I felt like I was running to find something better. But if I thought of the running as flying, it suddenly had a positive spin. I was branching out and starting life on my own, not avoiding the problems I just never really felt like dealing with. When we approached the front counter, we pushed Kara to the front, since she could convince the employees that we were sober enough to be tattooed. Her eyes were a bit glazed over, but we didn't think they'd mind. I'm sure they tattooed anyone who walked in with money. There was an artist available right away, so the three of us gathered around the chair as he quietly swabbed Felicity's wrist with alcohol. The tattoo was simple enough that it didn't take long at all to finish. Then it was Kara's turn, and I watched as she occasionally winced. I was pretty nervous, but I didn't want to tell the others. Plus, I didn't want to chicken out at the last second. I would never live that down if they got matching tattoos and I didn't get mine. "Does it hurt?" I asked Kara as the artist filled in the outline. "Not terribly. It hurts a little more than an injection, but less than the time we were practicing IV placement and that one guy stuck the needle in my tendon." We tried to giggle quietly, but the memory of Kara jumping up and pulling the needle from her own arm was one of the more entertaining parts of our education. The knot in my stomach grew as I waited for my turn. I knew that no matter what, I would have to play it cool and be tough, no matter how scared I was. But as frightened as I was really excited to finally step outside of my comfort zone. Eventually, it was my turn to get into the chair. My mind was screaming, but my body language was relaxed and nonchalant. I could do this. When the tattoo artist touched my wrist with the cold alcohol, I jumped a little, much to Kara and Felicity's delight. I wish I had gone first when I was still feeling a little tipsy. I was sobering up now, and it wasn't going to do anything for my pain tolerance, nor my nerves. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the man asked, giving me a suspicious glance. "Yes, I'm ready," I said quickly. He began his work, carefully tracing the outline on my wrist. It was starting to sting, and I could feel my legs start to sweat against the vinyl chair. "Want me to distract you?" Felicity asked, sensing my discomfort. She knew that I wasn't very good with pain. "Go ahead," I said, welcoming her to try. "There's a guy in the chair next to you," she said softly, leaning in toward me. "He's really cute." "I'm not going to look now," I said, probably a little too loudly. "I think he's looking right at you," she said. They both started giggling again. "I really doubt that," I winced. While it didn't seem possible that any guy would be staring at me, I was curious. I counted to 60 in my head and then slowly turned to see what they were giggling about. Sure enough, a very attractive man sat in the seat on the other side of me. Growing up in an Italian household, I instantly knew his heritage too. He looked like all the other guys in my neighborhood, except much hotter. He was tall, muscular, and something about him made him seem a little tougher than the boys on my block growing up. My parents would be pretty pleased if I brought a boy like that home, I whispered to my friends, or pissed. I can't decide which. I slowly moved my head back toward the man in the adjacent chair. He looked like he was probably close to my age, his face cleanly shaved and unlined. His short, dark hair was pushed back away from his forehead. Mostly, I noticed how calm he looked. He was being tattooed in the crook of his elbow, and he almost looked like he was enjoying it. His pink lips curled up at the edges, like he wanted to smile. I wasn't sure what to make of that. Meanwhile, I was clenching my opposite fist as I tried to relax the arm that was being worked on. However, I found that when I focused my attention on the boy sitting next to me, I could relax just a little bit. Okay, the tattoo artist said, wrapping a length of gauze around my arm. You're all finished. I looked down at the tiny bird on my wrist and felt a swell of pride. I had gone outside my comfort zone and done something without hours of careful planning. What else was I capable of? Hey, Felicity whispered as we walked up to the front counter to pay. Ask that guy out. What? I asked, spinning around to face her. You saw that guy looking at you. He's cute. Ask him to meet us at Golden Dawn in 30 minutes. I can't, I said, handing my credit card to the receptionist. Fine, Felicity said, shrugging her shoulders. You already did one daring thing tonight. I suppose it's too much to ask you to hook up with a hot guy, too. I felt the sudden need to prove her wrong. I was being asked to perform, and I needed to put on a show. I raised my eyebrows at her and marched over to the guy in the seat. I tried not to think about what I was doing, or I was sure to panic. I didn't think he saw me approach him, as his eyes were gently closed. He looked like he was about to fall asleep. Excuse me, I said nervously. His dark eyes snapped open immediately. It made my breath catch in my throat. Hello, he said calmly. I was wondering if... A smile appeared across his lips. His teeth were perfectly straight and white. I steadied myself, feigning confidence. I'm going to Golden Dawn in a half hour. Meet me there. He raised his eyebrows as if he was either surprised or impressed. I'll be there. I froze. I never thought about what I would do after I asked him. See you then, I said, turning abruptly and walking straight for the door. I forgot that Felicity and Kara were waiting for me until I saw them running after me. What did he say? They laughed, trying to catch up. I stopped. He said he'd be there. They squealed with delight, but I wasn't nearly as excited. Would he even show up? If some guy approached me in a shop and told me to meet him somewhere, I'd probably humor him. Let's find a good place to sit then, Kara said. This night has suddenly become much more interesting. What if he doesn't show up? I asked, feeling nervous. Then we'll find you another, Felicity said. There's no shortage of men in this city. We're not going to leave until you get some. I groaned, but I didn't think they could hear me. I didn't want to disappoint them, but I was mostly concerned about disappointing myself. He knows what he wants. Apollo. I was typically in a state of zen when I got tattooed, but there was something distracting me this time. Shortly after I came in, these girls stumbled in off the street, clearly having a good time. The two skinny blondes weren't really my type, but the third girl was pretty hot. She was short and cute, but damn, did she have an ass on her. Her tight skirt rode up high around her thick thighs. Her tan lines around the strappy top of her dress made me think of how good she would look in a bikini, her best assets jiggling for the whole world to see. I imagined taking her right in this very tattoo parlor. We'd find a private corner of the room and just go at each other like a couple of animals. I'd hike up her skirt and just let her ride me as I sat back in one of the chairs. She looked like a good girl, but I was sure she had a dirty side to her. I bet I could make it come out. The images were too clear in my mind. I closed my eyes, hoping that I could get her out of my mind. She definitely wasn't the hottest chick I'd ever been with, but I wanted her all the same. I tried to think of the most unappealing thoughts I could to get the feeling out of my body. If anyone saw me getting aroused in a tattoo parlor at 1 a.m, they'd probably think I was some sick freak. It was hard to suppress my sexual desire, though. I had been in prison for 5 years, and there was no outlet for my urges, except for my own hand when I could find the privacy. That was jail, though, so there was very little privacy. Now I could add one other thing I desperately missed while I was locked up: women. I wasn't a big player before I got to prison, but I got enough action that my needs were met. I could go on a date with a woman without worrying about whether or not she would sleep with me at the end of the night. Now I just wanted to stick it to any woman who showed the slightest interest in me. For that reason, Vegas wasn't a bad place to be. If the legions of easy women outside my door didn't want a quick roll around in the hay with me, I could always find an alternative. Although I hoped I would never be so desperate that I would pay for sex. I didn't have that kind of money quite yet. I opened my eyes to find the object of my desires looking straight at me. She looked away immediately, her eyes snapping back to center focus. I suppressed a chuckle. I could tell that she was embarrassed to get caught checking me out. I didn't mind, though, and it was only fair because I was checking her out, too. Unfortunately, she looked like she was pretty tied to her clique. Even if I met up with them again and tried to get her alone, I'm sure they'd rush to her defense, telling me that I'm intruding on their girls' night. Or she'd tell me that she had a boyfriend. Whether it was true or not, I knew that was code for fuck off. So I was pretty shocked when she approached me before they left. I felt like it was the universe paying me back for the shit hand it dealt me earlier. Things were finally going my way. She seemed pretty shy, so I know that asking me to go out with her really meant something. Otherwise, she could just approach anyone on the street. I was sure her friends had something to do with it, too. They were giggling and whispering too much to not draw attention to their little game. I agreed to meet this girl at a club, despite the fact that I didn't know her name, nor did I know anything about her. Well, except for the fact that she has a new tattoo and I want to have sex with her. That was very clear in my mind. Once I was done at the parlor, I went to a bar and got a quick drink. I didn't want to go back to my apartment, so I grabbed the cheapest beer I could find and sat for a moment. I checked my phone. It had been 35 minutes since I saw the girl and promised to show up in a half hour. I wasn't about to show up exactly when she told me to. That would look extremely desperate. And though I was desperate, I didn't want to look needy. There was nothing sexy about that. I leisurely finished my beer and made my way toward the club. I was only about 20 minutes late, which still seemed too early. I was just too eager to get with a chick that I couldn't help myself. Once I got into the place, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting at the bar, talking with her friends. Of course, she had chosen a spot where she could watch the door for me. I ducked around the corner. I would make her wait just a little longer. I surveyed the scene to see what kind of women showed up to a place like this. It was classier than the bars I usually frequented, so I guess she had a lot of money. The girls here weren't really doing it for me. A lot of tall, scrawny, bleach blondes with too much money to spend strutted around so everyone could get a look at their expensive new noses. They just weren't for me. If I didn't already have a sure thing waiting for me at the bar, I'd probably still try, though. Enough was enough. I needed to get this taken care of so I could sleep well. I would chat her up, get her to hook up with me, and then we would part ways, both satisfied. There was nothing to it. "I don't think you told me your name," I said, touching her bare shoulder. Her head spun around, long hair whipping behind. "You came," she said, surprised. "I said I would," I smiled. "I'm Apollo." "Apollo?" she asked. "That's an interesting name." "It's a family name. What's your name?" "Sierra." "It's nice to meet you, Sierra. Can I buy you a drink?" She nodded, and I ordered her a Long Island iced tea and a beer for me. I needed all the help I could get. "Do you want to dance?" she shouted over the music. I hesitated. I didn't really come to the club to dance and talk. I came for one specific purpose. But if it would help my chances, I'd give it a try. "Sure," I said, leading her out onto the floor. She pressed her magnificent behind against my pelvis and ground on me. I put my hands on her hips and swayed to the beat. I wondered if she could feel my pulsating package, begging for a little attention. Having her body on mine was such a tease. My hands were on her, but there was a pesky layer of clothing between us. That needed to change. I turned her around so she was facing me. She draped her arms over my shoulders and started kissing me. When we broke away, I leaned in to speak into her ear. "I think I know what you want. What if I told you that I wanted the same thing?" She looked at me, a little surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I'm saying that the back of the club is dark. We could easily go into one of those little private booths and screw." Her eyes widened. "But won't someone see us?" she slurred. "Not if we're discreet. What do you say?" I asked, letting my fingers wander around to her ass, giving her a thick squeeze. "I want you, and I get the feeling you want me too." She nodded, a wide smile appearing on her face. "Yes." Good two shoes no more. Sierra. Everything was happening so quickly. It seemed like it was only a short while ago that I was checking out the hot stranger at the tattoo parlor, and now he was leading me to the back of the club to hook up. First of all, I was so shocked that he actually turned up. I spotted him just when Felicity and Kara were comforting me about the fact that he didn't show. They were probably about 5 minutes away from playing matchmaker when Apollo approached me. Being a well-behaved person, I was pretty hesitant about doing anything with a strange guy, especially in a public place. But between the drinks and the spirit of the night, I felt like I could do anything. "Are you sure we're not going to get caught?" I asked. "No," he smiled and led me to the back. "That's what makes it so exciting." He was right about that. I was so desperate for his touch that I would probably jump on top of him in the middle of the dance floor if it came to it. I had never felt desire this strongly before. It probably had to do something about the fact that he was absolutely gorgeous, and he chose me out of all the hot girls in Las Vegas. "When I walked in, I noticed these booths in the back," he said. "I think they're for private parties, but since they're empty, I don't think anyone would notice if we used them for a few moments." I looked around the club. Sure enough, everyone seemed caught up in their own world. The music was so loud that I could hardly hear him, and it was so dark that I doubted anyone could see what we were getting up to. "How," I stuttered, "how are we going to do this?" I awkwardly gestured between our bodies, hoping he'd understand what I was hinting at. "However you want it, baby," he said, showing his dazzling white teeth. I wasn't an expert on the matter by any means. In fact, I had only done a few different positions in my whole life. I certainly wasn't equipped with the knowledge of how to have sex in a public place without getting put on a sex predator list. Apollo leaned up against me, my back on the wall. "Are you nervous?" he asked. I shook my head defiantly, trying to prove to myself that I could let loose and enjoy myself. He kissed my neck, and my knees almost gave out from under me. "I don't want to make you do anything you don't want me to do," he continued, his fingers finding their way up my skirt. I let out a small gasp when he reached me. "I want it," I gushed. "I want it now." At this, he grabbed my face with both hands and kissed me hard. A fire started inside me. I didn't care that my friends were somewhere in this bar. I needed to do whatever was necessary to have him. Once we stopped to catch our breath, he slid into the corner of the booth and patted his thighs. "Sit on my lap and face the club. If anyone walks by, our lower half will be covered by the table. It'll just look like we're having a conversation." I obliged immediately and joined him in the booth, sliding on top of his jeans. Facing out toward the crowd of people on the dance floor, I closed my eyes as Apollo's hand slid up my thighs, taking my dress with them. He quickly moved my body around and gently inserted himself inside me. My hands gripped the table once I felt his size, and I moaned. I knew I needed to play it cool, but I completely forgot where I was. I allowed Apollo to bounce me up and down, while my weight allowed me to go deeper and deeper. "Turn around," he said breathlessly into my ear. "I want to see your face when I make you come." I obeyed his orders, swiveling around to straddle his legs. He had a light layer of sweat on his face, giving his golden skin an extra glow. Now, in a more intimate position, we kissed again, his tongue swirling around my mouth. We hadn't been going at it for long, but his intensity was making it hard to hold on for much longer. Luckily for me, the club was so noisy that no one could hear my loud moans of pleasure, except for Apollo, who joined along. "Was it good for you?" I asked, before I could stop the question from escaping my mouth. He chuckled. "You have no idea," he said, zipping up his pants. "What about you? Did you have a good time?" I nodded, once again trying to play it cool. The truth was, it was the best sex I had ever had in my life. It was so simple and quick, but he made me come harder than I ever had before. I was still in a bit of a daze when he stealthily slipped out of the booth. "You don't have to lie to me," he winked. "If it was bad, just say so." "No, it's quite the opposite, really," I giggled. I couldn't wait to tell my friends about it. But there was still a small part of me that wanted to keep this moment all to myself. I knew I would never see this guy again, but I wanted to keep him with me, if only in my head. "I don't know about you, but I'm pretty thirsty," he said. "Can I get you a drink?" "Yeah," I responded. "That would be great." We walked further into the club, away from where Felicity and Kara were sitting. I wondered if they were even still at the bar. I checked my phone, and there were no messages, so I assumed they weren't concerned about where I was. I figured I could have one more drink before going to find them. While the second bar was nice, I wished that we had gone back to where my friends were. I would have loved to see the looks on their faces as I casually waltzed around the corner with Apollo in tow. I hadn't looked in a mirror yet, but I bet my smudged lipstick and messy hair would have told the whole story. Now I only had my word. Maybe if I gave them enough details, they would believe me. It would suck if they thought I was making it all up, though. However, the sex was so good that it didn't even matter that I did it to prove myself to them. I got way more out of it than they could ever imagine. "Are you looking for someone?" Apollo asked as my head swiveled around the room. "Did you tell another guy to meet you here?" "No," I laughed. "I'm all yours." "Do you ask guys out often? I must say, I don't think a girl has asked me out first." I blushed. "I hope I didn't seem too pushy," I said meekly. "I can't really explain what came over me." "No, I thought it was great," he said. "Now," he said, looking for a bartender, "let's get a few drinks and enjoy our time together." No strings attached. Apollo. I debated going straight back to my apartment once I got off with the girl, but I decided that I would go all out with my celebration. It's not every day that you get released from prison after 5 years. If there were any cause to celebrate, this would be the time. Unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of cash on hand, so I bought her a vodka tonic with the cheapest liquor I could get. For myself, I purchased a light beer on special. It wasn't particularly good, but it quenched my thirst, and even bad alcohol was better than no alcohol. After I gave her the drink, I gestured over to an unused, sticky table with 2 chairs. She sat down and sipped from the tiny straw, wobbling on the unsteady chair. Sierra was clearly intoxicated, but not so much that we couldn't carry a decent conversation. "How long are you staying?" I asked. "Tomorrow afternoon. We planned on going all out tonight, so we didn't want to be too hungover and tired on our flight home." "Good thinking, but I have a feeling that you're still going to be pretty miserable tomorrow if you continue on at this rate." She laughed. "I'm not much of a drinker. Does it show?" "Nah," I lied. wondering if she had 3 or 4 drinks before we fucked. She was giggly, but in a cute way. It wasn't annoying like the other screeching girls around us. "I don't think I want to leave this place," she said wistfully, looking out over the crowd. "It's not usually my kind of scene, but it's been surprisingly fun." "What is your kind of scene?" I asked. "Like something a little quieter, maybe a private beach or a weekend in a ski lodge. Not drinking bottle after bottle of champagne and staying out until the sun comes out. But you know what? I've really enjoyed all the craziness." She frowned. I hoped she wasn't the type to get emotional after a few too many. "What's wrong?" "I was just thinking that I'd probably never have the opportunity to do something like this again." "Why not?" "The reason we're here is because we passed our certification exams in nursing. I'm not a student anymore. Once I get back, I'm into full work mode. Our schedules are so crazy that I don't think we'd ever get the chance to do something like this again. It's just strange thinking about how life will never be the same again." "Then let's enjoy this moment while it lasts," I said, raising my drink to hers. "To freedom," she said. I echoed her and took a swig. That was something that I could understand, but on a completely different level. To a rich girl right out of college, freedom meant being able to go on expensive vacations and hook up with strangers in bars. When she went home, she would have to start her job, one that she worked very hard to get. Her days would be filled with taking care of patients, but at the end of the day, she'd still be able to go home to her own bed. She would still have a life outside of the walls of the hospital. On the other hand, I knew exactly what it was like to have your freedom taken away. It's probably surprising to a lot of people, but I had never been in any real trouble with the law until the incident. I'd been fined for underage drinking and petty things like that, but I'd never been arrested before. That's probably why my sentence was so short. For a repeat offender, money laundering could get you put away for a lot longer. During my sentencing, the judge noted that I had a clean record, which worked in my favor. However, people like me don't get off very easily. If you've got enough money and connections, you can make problems go away. A guy like me has to do jail time, no matter the circumstance. When the mayor is committed to cleaning up the streets, anyone remotely related to gang activity has to be put away. But it only applies to the bottom tiers of the gang. If you're on top, there are a few ways of getting away with serious crimes. First of all, if you have the money to pay off the cops and the connections with the higher-ups in the Justice Department, you're basically untouchable. Then, if you have any dirty work to do, you can pass it off to your underlings. A mob boss would never lay their hands on a person if they didn't need or want to. Finally, if a mob boss did find themselves in a sticky situation, there was always a fall guy. If the police are trying to pick you up for something, a fall guy keeps you from getting pinned for it. They confess to the crime and take the sentence to make the problem go away. In my situation, there were several of these loopholes in action. My father was supposed to be the one doing the money laundering for the boss. While I love and respect my father to a certain extent, he isn't the smartest man I know. Getting caught really wasn't his fault, though. I think just about anyone would in his situation. When you're tasked with hiding a lot of money, you have to be good with numbers. Why the boss ever got my old man involved, I'll never know. Maybe he held a grudge and wanted my father to get caught. My dad is a good guy, but he's had his fair share of trouble with the law. Another felony could put him away for at least 30 years, maybe even life. I couldn't let that happen. My mom would have been absolutely devastated to lose her husband, so I took the fall. The moment I found out about his arrest, I went to the police station and confessed to the crime. It's easier to confess to crimes you didn't commit when you're in a city where the government is corrupt. I didn't know the specifics of the case against my father, but I knew enough of the general facts that I could make it somewhat convincing. Then I was taken to booking. I even saw my dad being released as I entered. His face was white as a ghost, and he just nodded at me when we passed. He wasn't happy that I had to go on trial, but he knew that it was the best way to keep the family going. Plus, he didn't want to be in jail for the rest of his life. My mother was devastated that her son had to plead guilty to a crime he didn't commit. She was furious at both my father and me. But with time, she forgave us. Once her initial anger subsided, she visited once a month for the entire 5 years. Now I was free, and it was time to get my life back and to get revenge for everything my family went through. When the time was right, I'd go after the boss. But for now, I would seek all of the pleasures I had missed out on for so long. Like sex. Damn, I couldn't believe how much I missed sex. The best part was, the first girl I spoke to came to me. I didn't even have to do any of the work. Plus, she was just my type. Sierra was short and curvy, with those strong, thick thighs that I could really grab onto. I didn't know much about her. Hell, I didn't know anything about her, but she looked like a girl I could bring home to my mother. However, that would never happen. In fact, as it turns out, the best thing about Sierra was that I never had to see her again. She'd go back home, and I could remember the sex fondly from the privacy of my own home. I would never have to call her and talk about things I had no interest in. I wouldn't have to spend money I didn't have on fancy dates to please her. Most importantly, I wouldn't have to bring her along as I took back the life I once had. I would share one last drink with the sexy stranger who approached me in the tattoo parlor, and then we'd both go back to our own lives, never to see each other again. I could have amazing sex with no strings attached. In that moment, I had never felt so free. The bad girl, Sierra. As I sat with Apollo, I was trying hard to live in the moment and not completely freak out about what was happening. For the first time in my life, I was hooking up with a stranger. He wasn't just any stranger either. He was gorgeous, and he chose to get with me. As usual, I was starting to doubt myself. I didn't feel like I was beautiful or sexy enough to catch the attention of a guy. Then, I didn't think I was making good enough conversation. My brain was a little fuzzy from the drinks. Then, I wasn't sure if the sex was as good for him as it was for me. However, when I looked at the facts, it helped dispel my argument against myself. First of all, if he wasn't interested in me, he didn't have to go to the club. Next, if he wasn't interested in me, he would have left after the sex and not bought me a second drink. Finally, I saw his face as he came. I must have been doing something right. I smiled as I listened to him talk about how he just got into the city today. This was the first time I had ever managed to snag my dream guy. Apollo was muscular and clean-cut, but he also had a rough side to him. I had a thing for bad boys. This trip to Vegas was my last hurrah as a young person, and he came at just the right moment in my life. I knew my friends were around the bar somewhere, but I didn't really care. I would have more time with them in the future. I wouldn't have another night with Apollo. I balled up my fists under the table. If the tattoo and the club hookup weren't enough for me, there was just one more thing I wanted to do. I was feeling particularly lucky tonight. He had maybe 2 more drinks in his bottle before he would go home and leave me in the club. I had to make my move now. "It's still early," I said, checking the time. "What do you think about taking this back to your place? If sex in a club booth was that good, I can't imagine how great it would be in a bed." I bit my lip and tried to gauge his reaction. I saw him wince slightly, and my remaining self-esteem plummeted. "Or we can leave things as it is," I said quickly, backpedaling. "I should probably get back to my friends anyway." I crossed the line. This embarrassment would live in the crevices of my mind for some time to come. I tried to do too much in one night. I was glad that the risks I was taking had to do with guys that would go home at the end of the night, instead of at the blackjack table. Failure stung regardless of what I was doing, but at least I scored before I went home. "I don't know if that's such a good idea to bring you home," he said, rubbing the back of his head. "It's not that I don't like you. I think you're great and smoking hot. I'm just not into making relationships out of things that just won't work. It doesn't have anything to do with you as a person, but it's just the way I live my life. I'm not going to be in this city for long, so I don't want to find any reason to hold me down. Do you get what I'm saying?" "Oh, yeah, of course," I answered casually. "I'm not looking for anything more than a one-night stand. You don't have to worry about me holding you back. I do this all the time." In reality, I wasn't sure what he was so worried about. I wasn't going to suddenly become attached to him. I didn't have that choice. I would be getting on a plane and heading back home in less than 24 hours from now. I just wanted one last time with Apollo, because good lovers don't come around that often. I didn't really understand why he didn't want to have sex with me again. It was my understanding that guys would do whatever it takes to hook up with girls. I knew I should just take his explanation and go, but for some reason, it wasn't enough for me. Yet, his rejection made me even hotter for him. I wanted to conquer him, to prove that I could do anything if I just put myself out there. I wanted the forbidden romance. My past experiences had always been planned and consequently bland. I slept with boyfriends in their beds after going on dates to the movies or to a nice restaurant. Once the private act was over, we'd go to sleep. There was nothing spontaneous or adventurous about any of it. At the time I enjoyed it, but I had no idea how good it could be until I was with Apollo. I couldn't go back to infrequent and boring sex. Not again. When I thought of how ridiculous we were both being, I couldn't help but laugh. "What?" he asked, squinting at me. I bet I looked insane laughing at his rejection. "I only wanted to fuck you again because it was the best I ever had," I said through the giggles. "Don't act like I want to marry you or anything." He cracked a smile. "Good. I'd make a terrible life partner." "I don't doubt it. Do you really think I'm the type that can't separate sex and a relationship?" "Honestly?" he asked hesitantly. "Kind of. You seem like you're a very good girl who doesn't do this kind of thing very often." Was it that obvious? I hated the idea that guys could spot these kinds of things. Maybe that's why the bad boys that I liked so much never went after me. "Does a good girl fuck a stranger in a bar?" I asked. "Not usually. I suppose you aren't as squeaky clean as I thought." "So, what are we going to do now?" I asked. "You're almost done with your drink, and I don't think either of us came here just to talk. Either we can part ways now, or we can part ways in an hour once we've had sex again. I think you know what I want, but it's up to you." He thought for a few seconds, but it felt like I was waiting for much longer. Finally, he opened his mouth to speak. "Let's go," he said, grabbing my hand. I tried to hide my absolute delight and sent a quick message to my friends. "I'll meet you back at the hotel. I'm going home with the hottie from the tattoo parlor." Almost instantly, I got a reply. "What? I want full details about this tomorrow. Let me know if things get weird and you need to be rescued. Be careful." "Nothing about this is careful," I replied, "but it is fun. I promise I won't get myself murdered or anything," I joked. Once I told my friends my whereabouts, I walked hand in hand down the street with Apollo. I thought about asking him his last name, but I didn't really care. I wanted him for one thing and one thing only. Down and dirty, Apollo. I had my reservations about bringing this girl home, but I craved sex so badly that I could hardly think rationally. This was probably a fluke. If I didn't bang her, then who knows how long it would take for another girl to show up. I had 5 years of sexual desire built up inside of me. If I couldn't release it, I would drive myself insane. I don't know what came over me, but once we were outside the bar, I didn't drop her hand. Something about it felt nice. I must have been completely starved for human contact. While in prison, I learned that human contact is a basic human need. I had never been a touchy-feely sort of guy, but it made me think about all of the people I interact with in my daily life. During my time away, a night in bed with a woman, a hug from my mother, or even a handshake at work felt like a luxury. The closest I ever got to touching someone in prison was when I'd accidentally bump into someone, and then there was always the risk of being punched out for brushing up against the wrong person. Sierra's warm hand in mine made me feel human again. Sierra, the woman, meant nothing to me. She was a complete stranger, so there's no way she even could. But what she represented meant everything. She humanized me and reminded me of all the simple pleasures in the free world. "It's not much," I warned her before opening the door to my apartment. She seemed a little nervous, and for good reason, too. My apartment was pretty shady, and probably a big departure from the homes where she spent her time. I just moved in tonight. I literally don't have more than a few belongings here. That's fine, she said. This isn't a date. I'm not going to judge you on the state of your home. I opened the door to reveal the mattress on the floor and the open duffel bag, with its contents scattering on the floor. I quickly swept it up into a quick pile and pushed the mess into the corner. It didn't do much to spruce up the place. I'll be right back, I said, going into the bathroom. Taking the threadbare washcloth, I quickly wiped the sweat from the club off my body. It was only a quick fuck, but I wasn't a complete inconsiderate monster. Also, I couldn't get used to the fact that I could bathe at any time in the privacy of my own bathroom. When I came back, I caught Sierra looking around the place. There wasn't much to see, but it still made me feel nervous. Because of what I needed to do once I left the city, I wanted to remain as anonymous as possible. She must have sensed my discomfort because she jumped when she saw me coming around the corner. "What are you looking at?" I asked. "Oh, nothing," she said nervously. "You really weren't kidding when you said this place didn't have much." "Nope," I said casually and stripped off my pants and shirt. There was no need for ceremony when conducting a business deal like this. Sierra caught on and rushed over to the bed, pulling off her clothes too. Once she was on the bed, I took the time to really explore her body, taking in the sight of a real woman. She had so much to touch and squeeze, and I loved every second of it. Without doing anything but lying on the bed, she was arousing me more than I had ever felt with any other hookup. There was so much that I had missed out on in the past few years, and I wanted to make up for lost time. I guided her hands to exactly where I wanted them and told her what to do. She agreed to any request I gave her, making my body pulse with anticipation. I wanted to savor the moment, so I told her to give it a rest and worked her over for a little bit. For a good girl, she was willing to please and was open for anything. I loved the way she moaned whenever I touched her in the right way. Finally, it was time for the main event. To her credit, she was right about how much better it would be when we had as much room as we needed. I put her in every position I could think of, and she obliged, absolutely lapping it up. Even though I was working toward the end goal, I tried to savor the moment as much as possible. My hands and mouth caressed every delicious curve of her body. Her damp skin slid against mine so effortlessly, like we were gliding through air. When I hit the right spot, her eyes would close ever so slightly, and her mouth would gape. I moved inside her in a steady rhythm, as if we were moving to music, and not the sound of cars outside the apartment. The outside world ceased to exist in this moment. It was even better than my greatest fantasies that I dreamt up in my cell bunk. There was something about her that I hadn't experienced with other women. I wasn't always a controlling person, but I certainly knew what I liked in the bedroom. Instead of fighting me in order to seek her pleasure first, she listened to my directions and moved with me, not against me. We worked as a team. I was the leader, and she took instruction well. Women didn't always enjoy this style of lovemaking, but I think Sierra really enjoyed it. She was always looking to me for further instruction, and it turned me on like nothing else. When we were done, we laid on opposite sides of the mattress, panting. I was in good shape, and even so, I was a little tired. I looked over to Sierra and watched her as she breathed long, deep breaths with her eyes closed. A small smile rested on her face, and it reassured me that after all this time, I still had it. It was uncanny how compatible we were. Sex with strangers was almost always enjoyable, but often a little clunky and awkward. When you don't know what other people like, it sort of becomes a free-for-all and results in getting elbowed in the stomach or knocking heads. With Sierra, it was like we had been doing this for a long time. I even wondered if we had ever hooked up before when I was drunk and just didn't remember it. I knew that was impossible, though. I would have remembered her. "I should probably go," she said after a long, peaceful silence between us. "It's getting late." "You don't have to go," I said without thinking. People can be weird out there this time of night. I don't know if you want to be alone." She raised her eyebrow, pulling the threadbare sheet around her. "Really?" "Sure," I replied. "I'm probably going to sleep now, and you'll probably have to leave before I wake up, but I don't really mind." "Okay," she said. "I'm pretty tired too. Thanks." When she turned over, I cringed. It was an awkward conversation, but she handled it well and was kind to me. Apparently, my social skills had suffered while I was locked up. Most importantly, I didn't want to seem like I was having her stay for my benefit. Feeling unbearably sleepy from my long day, I rolled over and slowly drifted off to sleep. I certainly wasn't the type to cuddle after sex, and I really didn't want a stranger in my bed. But because of everything I had gone through, I didn't want to sleep alone. Instead of enjoying the solitude, I dreaded it. Eventually, it wouldn't be eerie to stay in an apartment alone, but for my first night of freedom, it helped to have someone there. Within minutes, Sierra's soft breathing had lulled me to sleep. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. In the shower, Sierra. Faint streams of sunlight through the dirty window woke me up in the morning. My mouth was incredibly dry, so I quietly crept through the room to the kitchen to find a glass. All of the cupboards were bare, and there was nothing in the fridge. I was feeling pretty desperate, so I tilted my head and turned the kitchen faucet on, letting the water run into my open mouth. Of course, the moment I did something that I didn't want anyone to see, let alone a cool guy, Apollo woke up and turned to me. "What?" he started to ask, not awake enough to find words for this particular situation. "I'm just a little bit hungover, and you don't have any dishes," I explained, wiping the water from my chin. He groaned and flopped back down on his pillow. "Sorry about that. I keep forgetting these things." "Where was it you said you moved here from?" I asked, noting the lack of moving crates. His eyes widened. "A small town around here. I'm not planning on staying here for long if I can help it. I'm trying to find some work. I repair motorcycles for a living, so wherever I can make money doing that, I'll go," he said quickly. "I figured that was something you can do just about anywhere," I said, finding his answer strange. "A change of scenery is always nice, too," he added. I nodded, noting his tension on the subject. Maybe he was trying to get away from a bad breakup or something. Whatever it was, it didn't concern me, and it was none of my business. "Where's my dress?" I asked, looking at the floor. "If I'm going to make my walk of shame, it's best that I do it early before people are out." He searched around the bed and pulled my skimpy dress from under the corner of the mattress. "Are you sure you want to put that back on?" he asked, tossing the wadded-up dress to me. "What's my other option?" I asked. "You could come back to bed for one last time. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to go." He lifted up the sheets and revealed his bulging underwear for proof. "If you insist," I giggled, hopping back into the bed. He scooped me up into his arms and started kissing me. We made out for what seemed like hours as he touched me inside of my underwear. Then his mouth traveled down my body. "Wait," I said, suddenly feeling very self-conscious. "I haven't showered yet, and I feel sweaty and grimy from the club." "Then let's get in the shower," he replied coolly, hardly looking up from my breasts to answer. I followed him to the tiny cubicle. The inside didn't look big enough for one person, let alone two. When he shut the door behind us, my butt smashed up against the pane. Lukewarm water gushed from the nozzle, and it felt rejuvenating. When I closed my eyes, I imagined that I was standing underneath a waterfall in a tropical rainforest with my lover. When I opened them, I was in a poorly lit bathroom in a scummy apartment. The lover was still fantasy-worthy, though. There wasn't a lot of room to move around, so Apollo used that to his advantage. As the water washed over us, he entered deep inside me, using the shower wall as leverage. I gripped his shoulders and held on for dear life. He plunged in and out at a quick tempo, picking up speed with each thrust. His sighs filled me up, and as hard as he was giving it to me, I still needed more. My short fingernails dug into his shoulder blades as I begged him to give it to me harder and harder. With a wicked smile on his face, he obliged. Finally, we both came, letting the water pour over our heaving bodies. Just when I thought things were done, he knelt down in front of me and buried his face between my thighs. "What are you doing?" I squealed, grasping his thick brown hair. "Giving you something to remember me by." He was correct about that. I don't think I'd forget the things he did with his tongue for the rest of my life. In fact, I had no idea that a human could have that many orgasms in a row. He let me use his towel to dry off before wrapping it around his trim waist. I slipped back into my dress from the night before and turned to face him before I left. This was the moment that I was dreading since I met up with Apollo at the club. I would have to say goodbye. One-night stands were tricky territory. It was different than meeting a new friend. With a casual friend, you could exchange information and make open-ended plans to meet up again one day when you were both in the same city. Almost always you never saw the person again, but you always knew that you could see them again and it wouldn't be too weird. With hookups, there was no chance of continuing something resembling a relationship. In fact, it was best just to cut all ties completely and forget it ever happened. But Apollo had made it very difficult to forget, and what he did to me in bed and in the shower, I would forever be comparing new lovers to him. It was as if I was meeting a ghost who would continue to haunt me forever. I wasn't very experienced with these sorts of things, so I wasn't sure what proper protocol was. Do we kiss? Hug? A handshake? Just thinking about it made my stomach hurt. The thing that bothered me the most was that I really liked him and I wanted to see him again. It wasn't just the great sex. He seemed cool and mysterious, and I could see myself getting to know him over long motorcycle rides through the desert. He was cute and kind of funny, and we seemed like we could be a good fit. We were both in the wrong place at the wrong time. I had to go back home, and he had to go find a new home. I doubted that he wanted to come to the posh suburb where I lived with my parents from time to time. He would probably find my best friends loud and annoying. My father would do his best to scare the shit out of him. It was probably for the best that we never saw each other again. "Well," I said awkwardly, "I suppose this is goodbye forever." "Yeah, I guess it is," he said softly. "Thank you for the good night," I said. "I should be thanking you. If you hadn't approached me at the tattoo parlor, I would have spent the night here alone." We hovered in uncomfortable silence for far too long. "Bye," I added quickly before turning to leave. "Life is long," he muttered. "What?" I said, whipping around. "Oh, nothing," he said casually. "I was just saying that life is long. Maybe I'll see you again one day." "If it's meant to be," I added cautiously. He nodded. "If it's meant to be." With that, I walked out the door into the brutal heat and hailed a cab. "Did you have a good night?" the driver asked, knowingly. He probably picked up more girls in evening wear than anything else. "It was nice," I answered. "Actually, do you mind if we go through a drive-thru? I'm dying for a coffee and a breakfast sandwich. Is that an odd request?" "Honey, you have no idea about the strange requests I get. I'm just glad you want fast food and not a few bumps of coke or a hooker." With a laugh, the driver sped away as I watched the buildings blur. I got the heavy feeling in my chest that came every time I left a place without knowing if I'd ever return. Best I ever had, Sierra. With the remnants of breakfast clutched in my fist, I stumbled into the hotel, the straps of my heels rubbing on my ankles. I jammed the last bit of the sandwich into my mouth, knowing that Felicity and Kara would chastise me about eating shitty food. I knew better than to inform them when I was planning to go on a diet. I tried to assemble my story in my head before walking into the room. I knew that once I got up there, my facts would get fuzzy under the pressure of presenting them a good story. If they didn't find it fascinating, then there was nothing I could do to impress them. By all accounts, it was a pretty wild night for someone like me. With any luck, this would get them off my back for always being a stick in the mud. Hopefully, we would talk about how amazing I did for years to come. Slipping my key card into the lock, I opened the door to find my friends passed out on the couch. From the evidence provided, they stumbled in at some point in the morning before undressing and taking off their makeup. For once, I looked better than they did. At least, I had the time for a quick shower. I grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator and chugged the entire thing in one go. After fighting off nausea, I sat down beside Felicity's feet, feeling considerably better. I wouldn't have to give myself an IV this time. Fuck, Felicity groaned, shielding her eyes from the sun. What time is it? Nearly 11, I answered. We have to be at the airport in a few hours. No, Kara said, stirring on the other couch. Fine, I countered. I'm getting on the plane with or without you. I went into the bedroom and put on a clean change of clothing. I slicked my hair up into a ponytail and suddenly felt much better. By the time I got back to the living room, the other two were still on the couch, but at least they were sitting up. They looked like hell, though. It took everything in me not to laugh at their misery. Sierra, Felicity said abruptly, remembering slivers of last night's events. What happened last night? Wasn't there a guy? I sighed. If their faulty memories ruined my story, I would never forgive them. Yes, remember? We went to the tattoo parlor and saw that guy. Remember that? Yes, Kara groaned. The hot guy from the club. You left with him, right? I did more than that, I said giddily. As I recounted the night, their jaws dropped lower and lower. At one point, Felicity closed her mouth just so she could drop her jaw again. You seriously had sex in a club? She squawked. I've never even done that. Kara's never even done that, and she's kind of a slut. Kara was too tired to protest. She was holding a cold water bottle to her forehead. It all happened, I said. Do you think I could imagine this kind of thing? Absolutely not, she replied. You have no imagination. That's how I know it's the truth. You guys, this guy was so dreamy, I gushed. He's tall, tan, and kind of muscular. He's definitely Italian too, so I bet we'd have a fiery relationship. Well, we would if I would ever see him again. You didn't get his number? Kara said, suddenly alert. Of course not. You guys have told me everything I need to know about one-night stands. Why would it matter? He's not interested in getting into a relationship now anyway. Where does he live? Do you remember the street? Kara continued her questioning. Honestly, it was all a bit of a blur. I didn't black out, but you know that I'm not great with directions as it is. He's maybe a block or two away from the tattoo parlor, but I couldn't tell you which building it was. If we went over there, would you remember? What's with the weird questions? Felicity asked. Are you still drunk? No, Kara groaned. Never mention alcohol ever again. I gritted my teeth. For some reason, I had the feeling that my father was paying Kara to spy on me. To an outsider, it would sound insane that my dad would pay off my friends to report on my whereabouts. Even to me, it was crazy. But I knew my father well. My whole life, he had done whatever he could to keep tabs on me. I knew it came from a place of love, but damn, it was annoying. My father's line of work made me a target for danger. My dad had a lot of enemies, and I was an easy way to get to him. If someone kidnapped or roughed me up, then he would be vulnerable. If my dad was anything, he was unstoppable. The first time I realized that this sort of thing was going on, I was in 8th grade. At our middle school dance, I kissed my first crush. No one should have known about it except for a few of my friends, and the teacher chaperoning the whole thing. When I got home from the dance, my dad knew everything and lectured me on the dangers of men. The next week, my math teacher was sporting a new Rolex. While Kara was one of my good friends from nursing school, I noticed a change in her about a year into our relationship. Kara has never had much money, but the moment she started to ask me detailed questions about my life, she started to get new clothes, fancy clothes too, like even nicer than mine. Unless she had some other job that I didn't know about, I figured she was selling information to my father. Of course, I didn't know this for sure. I couldn't call her out on it because I had so few good friends as it was, and I didn't want to lose her. Plus, I was worried that Felicity would bail on me if I accused Kara of such a ridiculous thing. No, it was best to keep my really big secrets to myself and let her have the less important stuff. She wouldn't tell my dad about a sexual encounter. I think I was to the age where my dad wasn't interested in hearing about it. So it was a little odd that Kara was so interested in Apollo in the first place. He clearly wasn't a risk. I would never see him again, and he would never look for me. I was sure of it. But like he said, if it was meant to be, we'd appear in each other's lives again one day. You never said what his name was, Felicity called from the bathroom. I want to look him up online. I tried to think of an alias for him. He was harmless and didn't mean anything to me, but I still felt the need to protect him from my father. Paul, I said after a too long pause. It was the first thing I could think of. Does Paul have a last name? Kara asked. I'm sure he does, but he never told it to me. I never told him my last name either. It just wasn't that sort of thing. I can't believe I'm explaining this to you two, of all people. It appears that the mentee has succeeded the mentors. I'm proud of you, Sierra, Felicity said, slipping on a sundress. Thanks, I said genuinely. It felt good to hear them be supportive of me. Now, let's go eat a gigantic breakfast and go home. Did you eat yet? Felicity asked me. Nope, I lied. Let's hit up the buffet. I bet they even have Bloody Marys, Kara. She whimpered as Felicity and I laughed at her. If Kara wanted to be a better spy, she would have to cut back on the drinking. I hoped that once I went back home to my life with my parents, the memory of Apollo would fade away. I would start work, and then I'd be too busy to hang out with guys, let alone think about them. Vegas was fun, but I felt like I needed a vacation from my vacation. Trust, Apollo. After Sierra left my apartment, I made a phone call to one of my prison contacts. The guy gave me names and numbers of the mob boss's inner circle. He said that if I could get in with them, I could get in with Giorgio. It was Giorgio who fucked over my father, leading to my jail time. I knew that it took time to worm your way into an organization like that, but I was feeling restless. It helped that my father was already a whipping boy to Giorgio. If my dad was any indication of my loyalty, then that might help my cause. I just needed enough people to vouch for me to get me in a position to finish him off. No matter what, I didn't want my dad to know about any of this. He didn't want me to be involved in this stuff in the first place, and he certainly didn't want me to start killing, even if it was the man who made our lives hell for so many years. If I finished him off, I knew that I would be making the world a better place, even if only motivated by personal reasons. I called one of the numbers my contact gave me and explained the situation I created. I told him that I wanted to make money, but I didn't want my dad to know I was involved. I said I would do whatever the boss needed me to do, but it had to be a secret. As it turned out, Giorgio was looking for new young talent. I would be paid very little, but in return, I could work for Giorgio on his secret projects. This was better news than I could have ever expected. I thought it would take months of trying to prove myself before Giorgio would even speak to me. Instead, the guy called me just a few hours after I made my proposal and asked me to come to one of his meeting places. By the end of the day, I'd be sitting face to face with Giorgio D'Angelo himself. Giorgio had more money and more connections than the president. There was nothing he couldn't do. I think he originally got his start in illegal betting in New York, but has since moved the bulk of his business to Vegas. He could legally buy a share in one or two of the big casino chains and do a whole lot of illegal stuff to boost his profits. Plus, what better way to funnel more illegal businesses through than to make it look like the money came from a legitimate place? My dad didn't like to talk about his work much, but I figured out that while he did most of his work in intimidation, he also carried a lot of money around. He wasn't one of the top accountants, but just low enough on the food chain to get busted for handling the money wrong. It's funny to think about, but there was once a time in my life when the gang life was extremely appealing to me. My dad's friends all seemed so cool and tough, and I wanted to be just like them. That's even the reason why I fell in love with tattoos. Everyone I knew was strong, rich, and didn't take shit from anybody. As I got older, the job lost its appeal. I found out that a lot of people were getting killed for stupid reasons. Plus, this wasn't a business where hard work could help you move up. A little trust may help you get in with the big dogs, but you'd never get the big payout in the end. Giorgio took the most, despite doing the least amount of work, and the leftovers were scattered around to everyone else in the organization. People who dedicated their lives to the job got fucked over on a regular basis. I'd rather find work on my own. But seeing as I was dead broke and wanted revenge, this was probably the best channel to go through. I would make enough money to flee when the time was right. Then I could really start over, like I told Sierra I was going to in the first place. So I wasn't really lying to her when I told her my plans. I just hadn't gotten to that stage of the plan yet. I was a little nervous about what would happen when I met with Giorgio. I had never formally met him myself, but I heard a lot of unflattering stories. I knew he was a brute who didn't care who got hurt when he was putting together a business deal. Unfortunately, I didn't have anything more than a high school diploma, so bookkeeping was probably out of the question for me. My math skills weren't good enough to boost me to a higher level within the organization, and I'd probably end up like my old man. Unfortunately, a young, strong guy like me would probably end up being an enforcer. This means that I would have to pound a few faces in to get Giorgio whatever he wants. I wasn't a fan of violence, but I had been in my share of fights. If that's what he wanted me to do, I would do it. All I knew was that whatever Giorgio wanted me to do, it was only undercover work. I would work hard enough to gain his trust, and then I would fuck him over like he fucked my family over. The revenge would be sweet. Then I'd get the hell out of town and get far away as possible. I didn't have the specifics of the plan ready yet, but when the time came, I would be ready. First, I would have to meet with the leader of one of the country's biggest crime syndicates and convince him that I was an asset to the team. No big deal, right? Promotion. Apollo. I didn't have a car to drive to Giorgio's hangout, so I found a friend of mine that let me borrow one of his motorcycles. That was the third thing I missed while being locked up. Tattoos, girls, and riding motorcycles. Everything else in life didn't truly matter to me. Admittedly, I was nervous about this meeting. I had guys to vouch for me, but for some reason, a nagging thought kept popping into my head. What if he knew what I was up to? The thought was part paranoia, part realistic. He must have known that I took the fall for my father. He would either see that as great loyalty to the cause or a reason for revenge. Also, I had never double-crossed anyone before. I was still relatively young and pretty inexperienced with this sort of thing. One mistake could get me killed. It was hard to feel anxious while on a motorcycle with the wind whipping across my body. The ride cleared my head and reminded me that if I succeeded, it would all be worth it in the end. Even if I failed, it was all for a good cause. Giorgio's meeting spot was about 20 minutes out of the city in a wealthy little suburb. I knew that he owned a lot of houses around the country, so this must be his hideaway when he is conducting business in Vegas. He had better sense than to let potential employees come to his house, so I met him at a fancy steakhouse in the middle of town. "Do you have a reservation?" the snooty host asked me when I entered the building, taking off my helmet. "I'm here to meet with Mr. D'Angelo," I replied, looking around the place. This was one of those restaurants I'd probably never be able to afford. Crystal chandeliers dangled from the ceiling, the light reflecting from each faceted stone. "Yes, sir. Right this way." Sitting at the back of the restaurant in the center of the table was Giorgio D'Angelo. He was a large man, but what was once a muscular exterior had gone soft during his years of power. His tan skin was beginning to crease, as if it had spent too many vacations on his yacht. He was clearly old school, with his slicked-back black hair and obnoxious amounts of gold jewelry decorating his body. On each side of him were two of his henchmen, both larger and younger than their boss. Just by looking at them, I could tell that they did everything Giorgio ordered them to. Plus, they had more than likely killed a few people who got in his way. Apparently, they had done something right, or they wouldn't be sitting next to Giorgio during his meetings. Maybe I could learn from them. When I approached the table, the men stood up to greet me. I placed my hand into their very firm handshakes, squeezing with appropriate force. They were the type to use intimidation tactics whenever possible, even in something as stupid as a handshake. "It's nice to finally meet you, Apollo. Your father has been a very trustworthy employee of mine over the years. Can I expect the same from you?" "Yes, Mr. D'Angelo," I said firmly, looking him straight in the eye. "You can call me Giorgio," he said, flashing a few of his gold-capped teeth when he smiled. "I'm not sure if you were told this, but I don't want my father to know that I'm asking you for a job. He knows that there are—" I paused, searching for the right words. "There are often risks involved, yes," Giorgio finished for me. "I get it. I'm a parent too, and I don't know what I would do if my daughter was ever put in harm's way. You can never be too careful with your own blood. But you came at the right time. I believe I can find some work for you, and your dear old dad doesn't have to know about it." "Thank you," I said, feeling relieved. "First, I need to ask you something. I need the full truth. Understand?" I nodded and swallowed a lump in my throat. "I understand that you spent some time in prison for your father's crime. I respect that, but I need to be sure that you don't have any resentment toward the business. Feelings like that would be very bad for business, and those who cannot complete the job won't get very far. Do you understand what I'm asking?" I did. He was making sure I didn't want to get revenge on him, the very thing I came here to do. Along with his question, he was placing a thinly veiled threat on the table. I understood completely. I was only doing the right thing by my family. If I wasn't willing to do whatever it takes to work for you, then I don't think I would be sitting here today. Giorgio nodded solemnly. "Welcome to the family, Apollo. It goes without saying, but you're bound to our rules on secrecy now. Break our trust, and you won't get away without punishment." My chest felt tight. I either had to be extremely careful with my plan, or I would certainly be murdered. That was a lot of pressure for one person. "Now," Giorgio said, his tone suddenly cheerful, "I think this is cause for a celebration." He snapped his fingers, and a waiter brought over a bottle of red wine and 4 glasses. "Would you like to hear your first assignment?" "Of course. There's a casino in the city that I've been doing business with. However, the owner of the place is deliberately disobeying my suggestions. I need you to go over there and give him a reminder that he needs my help if he wants to be successful." "You want me to find the owner of the casino and knock him senseless?" I said brashly. Giorgio made a shushing noise, as if I had completely misunderstood him. "We don't talk that way in public," he said, stealthily looking around the restaurant. "Do whatever you need to do to send the strong message that I am on to him, and the next time he disobeys, he's going to be very sorry." I understood perfectly. Find the guy, beat the crap out of him, and tell him his beating was a courtesy of Giorgio D'Angelo. "Where's the casino? Who's the guy?" "Excellent questions," he said to his henchman. "I think he's going to fit in well around here." I raised my eyebrows ever so slightly. I didn't like being talked about right in front of my face. "You will go to the Enticer tonight. There's a 90% chance that you'll find Frankie in the strip club. Wait around until he goes outside to smoke. Follow him outside and have a little chat with him. Make sure no one else is around. If you need to, stake him out all night." One of his henchmen pulled a plain envelope out of his jacket and slid it across the table to me. I leafed through the contents. There was a photograph of a toad-like man inside, plus several $100s in cash. "That's Frankie. Study the picture so you can find him quickly. The cash is for you. Buy yourself a drink at the bar. Do whatever you need to do to not look suspicious. If he gets spooked, he'll run. And then we can't talk to him, can we?" "This is an advance for my job?" I asked to clarify. Giorgio laughed a hearty chuckle. "No, you'll get paid your fee after you complete the job. This is just a little petty cash to keep you from looking like you're working. Do you have any questions about what you need to do?" "Nope." "Very well," Giorgio said, standing up from the table to shake my hand again. Get in touch with one of my boys once the job is complete. Good luck." Without another word, I turned to leave. I felt the blood drain from my face. I suspected that Giorgio would want me to hurt someone, but I'd hoped he'd find something a little less violent to do. Not wanting to drag this out any longer than it needed to be, I drove toward the casino, my stomach in knots the whole time. Inside the building, I ordered 2 shots of cheap whiskey to settle my nerves. Handing over a bill to the bartender, I threw them back, the liquor burning my throat. I had become somewhat of a lightweight in gel, and the alcohol made my brain buzz. Overall, I felt a little better with a few drinks in my system. I still didn't want to pummel a stranger for no reason, but I felt myself loosen up to the point where I could probably convince myself to do it when the time came. I found the strip club, and sure enough, the guy from the photo was sitting right in front of the stage. I could tell that he was a frequent visitor because the girls were swarming him. He'd grab their asses like they belonged to him. They did their best to mask their disgust of him. Not wanting to draw attention to myself, I ordered some food and drinks from the bar and enjoyed the show. I'll admit, getting paid to eat and drink while being ground on by hot strippers wasn't a bad gig. I could see why guys worked for the mob. A girl asked me if I wanted a private dance, and it took all the willpower I had to refuse. She even tried to make a deal with me, just because she thought I was cute. There was a good chance that if I paid her for a private dance, we would end up having sex in the private room. On a normal night, sure, I would go for that. But this was work, and I couldn't get distracted. Luckily, Frankie got up from the table and exited out a back door. I followed him to the back parking lot, next to the dumpsters. I surveyed the scene, and it was all clear. It was time. "Frankie Kelly," I called to him. "Who wants to know?" he called back in a whiny voice. "Giorgio D'Angelo." He spun around, a look of horror on his face. "I'll give him the money. Tell Giorgio I'll give him the money," he whined. That's not good enough for Mr. D'Angelo. I was sent here to make his message clear. "Fuck you," he spat at me. "You're just some stupid kid who thinks he's tough. You've probably never had a hard day of work in your life. Probably still suckle on your mom's tit." Now I was genuinely mad. Who was he to talk shit about me to my face like that? No, I had no qualms about knocking him out anymore. I swung at him and he ducked, sending me flying forward, sprawled out on the concrete. I scrambled to my feet and made contact with the side of his jaw this time. He fell to the ground, and I kicked him repeatedly with my boots until he stopped yelling. I knelt down beside him. He was still conscious, but barely. "You made a promise to Giorgio D'Angelo. If you mess up again, things will be much worse for you. Do you understand?" He wheezed, blood trickling from his mouth. "Good." With that, I calmly walked through the casino, trying not to look suspicious. When I had gotten 10 feet out of the door, I sprinted to my bike and rode to my apartment as quickly as I could. When I got home, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to quell the nausea. I'd been in fights before, but never against people so defenseless. I felt dirty, like no amount of scrubbing the man's blood off me could make me feel clean again. I reminded myself that as defenseless as he was, this Frankie fellow was no saint. He was a degenerate, just like everyone else in that casino. The only difference was he was getting rich off other people. He could be as disgusting as he wanted, and everyone had to do as he pleased. It was hard to feel sorry for someone like that. After hours of reminding myself why I was working for Giorgio, I fell asleep. My first task was over. And if Giorgio was impressed, I was one step closer to reaching my final goal. In the morning, I had a missed text message from Big John, one of Giorgio's men. Apparently, he was pleased with my work and had a job for me in New York as soon as I was ready. Missed period. Sierra. I counted the weeks on the tiny calendar hanging up in the nurse's station. It had been 4 weeks and 5 days since I met Apollo that night in Vegas. The tiny bird on my wrist took on a whole new meaning. When I was with Apollo that night, I felt like I was flying. When I looked at the tiny black bird, I thought of him and wondered what he was doing. Work was almost harder than I imagined it would be. Nursing school had prepared me for the long hours and difficult patients, but it was different now that I was running the floor on my own. Hospitals in the city were notoriously understaffed, and I felt like I was constantly running. After 2 or 3 weeks, I felt the stress of the job taking its toll on my body. I felt exhausted all the time, even after a good night of sleep. I felt nauseated, probably from never having enough time to eat or drink anything with any semblance of nutrition. I loved my new job, but I already longed for the days where I could sleep beside the hottest guy I'd ever been with. Even though I told myself not to, I thought about Apollo a lot in the following weeks. I wondered where he was, if he was still in Las Vegas, or if he had moved on. I imagined a backstory for him, stories about a kid from a blue-collar family leaving home to make a name for himself. I thought about riding on the back of his motorcycle, the vibrations from the machine making me clutch tighter around his hips. I spent nights after long shifts in my bathtub thinking about him as my hands wandered. I even searched his first name online and found absolutely nothing to do with the man I knew. His first name was part of a Greek mythology, even though I swore he was Italian. Maybe one parent was Greek and the other was Italian. That would explain his tan skin and dark hair. I wondered if he had the Italian temper I saw so often with my dad. My dad was everything to me, but he could be a bit much at times. I was his little girl, and while I loved being the center of attention from time to time, his protective nature could be overbearing. I mean, he hired my teachers and friends to spy on me throughout my whole life. That wasn't something that normal parents did. But regardless, I loved him anyway. He was away a lot for work, but he always returned from his travels with expensive gifts for Mom and me. It made up for the fact that he wasn't always home, but when he was grouchy from work. Occasionally, I would try to imagine introducing Apollo to my father. Even in my most optimistic fantasies, it always ended with the two of us running away because my father didn't approve. It wasn't that Apollo was any worse than he was at his age, but the fact that no one could be good enough for me in his eyes. "Sierra," Kara said to me, snapping me out of my daydream. "Felicity and I are grabbing a drink after this shift. Are you in?" "Yes, please," I said. My feet ached, and I already had 2 patients yell at me today. I needed to blow off some steam. Luckily, Felicity and Kara worked at the same hospital. At 10, we went to a little tapas bar across the street. We ordered snacks and a glass of white wine each. "When can we go back to Vegas?" Kara whined, rubbing her temples. "Not soon enough," I replied, taking a sip. "I'm surprised that you want to go back," Felicity noted. "I knew you had a good time, but it seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime trip for you." "Of course she wants to go back," Kara interjected. "Apollo is there." The two of them oohed and awed while I rolled my eyes. They were right, but I didn't like their teasing. "Have you heard anything from him?" Kara asked. "An email or phone call or anything?" "Nope," I said flatly. "Not a trace. I can't find him and he can't find me. That's just how things are going to be." "You're trying to find him?" Felicity squealed. "You didn't tell me this." I had slipped up. It was pathetic of me to scour the internet for a guy who didn't have any interest in me. "I was curious," I admitted. "I wasn't planning on contacting him. He just seemed so interesting. I couldn't help myself." "I've been there," Felicity said, knocking back her drink. "It never ends well. It's best to pretend it never happened." I nodded in agreement, and we changed the conversation to talk about the hospital. I was glad that I wasn't the only one who had a long day. "And to make things worse," Kara said, "I started my period right in the middle of putting in a patient's IV line. Luckily, I had a spare pair of scrub bottoms in my locker. I took a tampon from your bag, though, Sierra. Hope that's all right." "No problem," I laughed. "I haven't started yet." I did a mental count of the days since my last period. My friends and I were usually synced up. If today was the 25th, then I should have started almost a week ago. My new job was extremely stressful, so it made sense why I was late. Then I realized the other reason I could be late. At the time, things happened so quickly with Apollo that I didn't even think about using a condom. Then, in my haste to get back to the hotel to tell my friends about my night, I didn't even think about getting the morning after pill from the pharmacy. Everything clicked into place. Were my late period, fatigue, and nausea all symptoms of something bigger? I couldn't even think the P word in my head. It was a thought so outrageous that I couldn't even fathom it. But being the type A personality that I was, if I was really pregnant, I needed to know now. Every minute that I sat here wondering was making me lose my mind. What were my options if I really was pregnant? I'd always told myself that I would raise a child regardless of my circumstances, but it would be impossible to explain to my father. He'd go on a manhunt and probably kill Apollo. The only good thing about this is that I'd know where he was, but I didn't want any harm to come to him. I just wanted to be able to talk to him. "Should we order another glass?" Felicity asked. "I think I'm going to head home," I said softly. "Is there something wrong? We'll stop making fun of you about that guy." "No, I'm just exhausted. I didn't sleep well last night. I'll see you two tomorrow, bright and early." I should have been a little more discreet, but I was too distracted to stay any longer. I sped to the pharmacy closest to my house and picked up a pregnancy test. As I waited to check out, I felt like I was a teenager about to get caught. I was 22. I shouldn't have to feel that kind of shame. But for some odd reason, I was terrified of getting caught. Next, I raced to the apartment I shared with Felicity while her other roommates were away and bolted up to my room. In the bathroom, I followed the instructions on the package. After giving the sample, I would have to wait 3 minutes to see if I was pregnant or not. I dropped the sample into the testing strip and sat on the toilet, my pants around my ankles. I was too nervous to move. Then I waited the longest 3 minutes of my life. I couldn't stand staring at the indicator, so I closed my eyes and counted in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pregnancy test, Sierra. I made it all the way to 153 when the door burst open. Felicity was holding a bottle of wine, giggling. I covered my lower half with my hands, completely startled. My heart pounded in my chest. "Sorry," Felicity laughed. "I didn't know you were in here. You should have locked the door." "I thought you were still at the bar," I screeched. "I'm sorry I scared you. After you left, we decided to leave too. I thought we could lie in bed together, have some more wine, and watch a movie. What's gotten into you?" Her eyes drifted from my shocked face to my hand. In my hand, I clutched the pregnancy test. Her eyes scanned the room to the test packaging on the counter. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Is that?" "I'm sure I'm not," I said in a calm voice. "But I know I would worry about it if I didn't take the test. It's nothing. You know how I get." She nodded, her hand covering her mouth. "What does it say?" In all the excitement, I had forgotten to look. My fingers covered the test strip. "I can't look," I said. "I'm too nervous." "Do you want me to do it?" I grimaced. "I don't know if that's any better." She slowly extended her hand toward mine. I closed my eyes tight and dropped the stick into her hand. "No matter what this says," she said slowly, "it doesn't really mean anything. Even if it's positive, it could always be a false positive. And if it is—" "I don't know what I'm going to do," I interrupted. "You'll be fine," she continued. "There are plenty of options. Besides, you'd be able to be a mother while you're still hot. That's something a lot of women can't say." I groaned. I knew she was trying to lighten the mood, but I was petrified. She opened her hand, and I watched her expression change. Her eyes widened, and her lips parted. What does it say? I asked, already knowing the answer. She pursed her lips and sighed. It's positive, Sierra. All I could hear was white noise. I felt faint, so I dropped my head onto my naked thighs. I wanted to cry, but nothing came out. Everything was numb. Sierra, I heard Felicity say from the static, are you okay? Yes, I mumbled, even though I wasn't. Pull up your pants and let's lie on your bed for a little bit, she said slowly, her voice full of concern. I blindly obeyed her instructions and flopped down on my bed. She got in next to me, pulling the top off of the wine. She took a swig and handed it to me. Oh, sorry, she muttered once she realized that she was offering alcohol to a potentially pregnant person. I felt myself beginning to process what was happening, but I still couldn't fully believe it. I was almost certainly pregnant from a one-night stand with a guy that I knew nothing about. If I didn't find him, I would have to raise this baby on my own. That might have been okay if I didn't have any feelings for the father, but I really liked Apollo. I believed that if we had the chance, we could be something more, maybe even a family. You can't tell anyone about this, I pleaded to Felicity, tears in my eyes. Of course I won't, she said. Have a blood sample taken as soon as possible, though. These tests are accurate more often than not. I will. Not at our hospital, though. Kara can't know about this. I won't tell her without your permission, but she's your friend. Why don't you want to tell her? I wasn't about to go into all the intricacies of my suspicions surrounding Kara. There was too much craziness going on to make a strong case to Felicity about it. I need to figure out what I'm going to do first. Just promise me you won't let anyone know. I promise. We sat on the bed in silence, her arms wrapped around me. Felicity knew that sometimes not saying anything was just as good as talking about it. What am I going to do? I squeaked out moments later. The hell if I know, Felicity replied. Your instincts are always right, though. I know whatever you decide, it will be the right thing. If you want me to be the father to your baby, I will. I smiled for the first time since I left the restaurant. Thanks, Felicity. It's no problem. I know you do the same for me. We laid together in silence for a few hours before I must have drifted off to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, she was gone. No matter what, I was all on my own for this. There was no other way around it. The meeting. Apollo. 5 weeks after my first job, a black town car arrived outside my Las Vegas apartment. I pulled myself out of bed and wrapped my sheet around my lower half when I heard the pounding on my door. I figured someone would at least call first, but Giorgio waited for no one. I have orders to take you to the airport, the man in the dark suit and sunglasses said to me when I opened the door. What? I squinted, the light from outside burning my retinas. The driver gave me an exasperated sigh, clearly not used to being asked so many questions. Mr. D'Angelo sent me to pick you up and take you to the airport. Okay, I said hastily. Give me a few minutes to get dressed and all of that. Come back in an hour, okay? No, he said. I have strict orders to leave your apartment right now. He said it shouldn't take you long to pack up. Apparently, Giorgio had done his research. It only took me about a minute to pull on some clean clothes and stuff the others into my duffel bag, which the chauffeur took from my hand. Where am I going? I asked. Did Mr. D'Angelo tell you that? I was growing impatient at the lack of information I was receiving. He handed me another white envelope, this time with a plane ticket inside, LaGuardia Airport. I was going to New York. Great, I muttered under my breath. I had just settled into that shack of an apartment, and now I had to pack up my life and move again. The past month had been pretty good for me. I went on a few more jobs like the one I had the first night, mostly intimidating people who hadn't paid their debts to Giorgio. My knuckles were raw from beatings, but I was getting stronger and better at fighting. I still hated the work, but I loved the money I got from it. I was building a good rapport with Giorgio's inner circle. I obeyed their orders with meticulous attention to detail, and I never complained. I kept to myself, just as I did in prison, and it was paying off. I wouldn't get caught for the assaults because I never opened my mouth. That alone helped me climb the ranks of the organization. Now I had to start all over again in New York. I didn't know how long I would be there, only that my time in Las Vegas had come to a close. I wasn't very sorry about that, though. I didn't like Vegas any more than I liked New York. Both were too loud and too grimy. I'd rather be somewhere quiet and peaceful. But if Giorgio wanted to fly me out to New York, then I must have been doing something right. I just wish I could have contact with my parents. I wrote to them and told them that I wanted to spend some time alone before visiting them. They were heartbroken, but they couldn't do anything about it. They had to respect my wishes, especially after everything I did for them. The whole flight, I tried to guess what Giorgio could possibly want me to do in New York. His entire business was based there, so it was certain that he had enough henchmen and enforcers running around. I had the least amount of experience by far. Why would he ask me to come here? At the arrivals hall, I spotted my name on a piece of paper, held by another man in a dark suit and sunglasses. It was as if the driver from Vegas teleported to New York just to pick me up. He didn't say a word as he led me to a black SUV. When he opened the door for me, I expected to see Giorgio's smug face in the back seat. Instead, one of the men, John, from the first meeting, greeted me. "Nice to see you again, Apollo," he said cheerfully. "Where's Giorgio?" I asked, sounding more annoyed than I meant to be. Long flights stressed me out. "I'm going to take you to your apartment. Giorgio won't be available until tomorrow. He'll arrange a meeting with you then to discuss your next job." "Why do I need an apartment?" I asked. "Am I going to be here for a long time?" "I don't have any details for you, and I probably couldn't discuss them if I could. You'll find out tomorrow." I gritted my teeth and clenched my fists throughout the whole drive. I knew that if I opened my mouth, I would start yelling, and I didn't want John to report that back to Giorgio. Instead of talking, I stared out the window, not really looking at anything. In my mind, I was working on a plan to get back to Giorgio. It was nearly impossible to keep my cool when he was around. I hoped that I could make it through the meeting tomorrow without blowing my cover, unless he was alone. Then maybe I'd just go ahead and do it. However I did it, I wanted it to be quick, but painful. I wanted to make sure he knew exactly what he did before I ended his life. I hated violence, but he was the only man who made me feel truly homicidal. I would have to get a knife or something. That was probably the simplest way. A gun wouldn't be too hard to get, but on the off chance that I managed to buy one, I didn't want any of Giorgio's men finding out about it. I was new to the organization, and I didn't know whom to trust. No, the best case scenario is that I could catch him off guard and either beat him to death or quickly slit his throat. If I had enough time alone with him, I wouldn't hesitate. The only problem was, he was rarely alone. When you've made a lot of enemies, you have to protect yourself. A lot of people would go after family members, but I wasn't interested in that kind of thing. I didn't want an innocent person to get hurt. I just wanted to stop Giorgio from doing this kind of thing ever again. When we got to what would be my new apartment, for an indeterminate amount of time, I was almost even more pissed off at how nice it was. It was just a one-bedroom apartment, but it was spacious, especially for this city. It was immaculate with all new appliances and electronics. The pantry came fully stocked, and the fridge was filled with beer. It was everything I could ever want. That's why I hated it so much. I didn't deserve fancy things like this. I had no money and no life. My shitty place in Vegas, as much as I disliked it, felt more home than this place. "Who lived here before?" I asked John. "There's no way that Giorgio bought this just for me. Don't ask me questions, and I won't tell you lies," he answered simply. I rolled my eyes behind his back. I was getting fed up with this shit. "Is there anything else you need?" John asked. I could tell that he wasn't amused that he had to play host to an underling. "Nope," I replied coldly, "except a few explanations might be nice." "Your meeting with Giorgio is tomorrow. Be ready." "What time?" "It's not up to us. You just better be ready when it's time." "I'll be right here. Not moving an inch, I said, trying to put a damper on my sarcasm. Good, he responded, matching my tone. He tossed a cell phone at me. It looked used. This is yours for work purposes only, he said. Remember, you never want to be too specific when talking about anything. Can I use it to order pizza? John looked at the fully stocked kitchen and then back at me. Do you really think that's necessary? I'll take that as a no. John turned to leave, clearly anxious to get back to his own life. If you need anything, there are some numbers programmed into that phone. Don't call Giorgio unless it's an absolute emergency. Then he briskly walked out of the apartment and shut the door behind me. Once he was out of earshot, I stuffed one of the fluffy throw pillows into my mouth and screamed. I hoped I got a moment alone with Giorgio soon. I didn't know how much of this I could take. It was one thing to relocate one of your employees. It was another to keep him under house arrest and leave him in the dark. Mom's drunk. Sierra. Thursday was my day off. Luckily, my work schedule was so insane that I managed to forget that I was pregnant a few times. The morning after I took the pregnancy test, I found a lab that would give me a blood test just to confirm what I had suspected. Sure enough, I had a message on my phone midway through my shift telling me that I was, in fact, pregnant. By that point, I had no feelings left to feel. I wasn't really in denial, but I was too cool, even by my own standards. It wouldn't be real to me until my body started changing. It wouldn't feel real until other people knew. I still wasn't ready to broach that subject with anyone. I hoped that my friends and family could chalk up my weight gain to stress eating, and that I wouldn't have to announce it until month 5 or so. Maybe by then, I'd have come to terms with the whole situation. For my day off from the hospital, I wanted to stay in bed all day and watch TV. My father had different plans. Sierra, he said cheerfully through the speaker of my phone. Daddy, I greeted him. I knew I was way too old for this pet name, but he loved it, and I loved to make him happy. Why aren't you at work? Day off. What's going on? I was going to see what your schedule was like. Your mother and I want you to stop by the house and have dinner. Oh, I don't know, I said. I'm pretty tired. Please, darling. I want to hear all about your trip. I don't think we've seen you in a month. He was good at making me feel guilty. Fine, I said. What time? Stop by whenever, but I think your mom is planning on finishing her cooking by 6. 6 it is, I replied and hung up the phone. I carried on with my morning, eating my bowl of cereal in bed and surfing the web for baby supplies. I even read a few articles on childcare before slamming my laptop shut. It was just too much to think about. Even though I was a nurse and I'd helped women deliver babies, the thought of doing it myself was horrifying. I absolutely loved kids too and loved every shift in pediatrics that I was assigned to. But I didn't have to spend my whole life with the kids. At the end of the day, I could just clock out and go home. As a parent, that just wasn't an option. I had always dreamed about having kids of my own one day, but when I imagined it, I was always married and the kids were planned. This was so different from my life plans that I didn't know how to go with the flow. I lived my life by schedules and timetables. I wasn't great at spontaneity. Around 4 that afternoon, I decided that I had done enough moping around and got ready to go to my parents' house. They lived in a gorgeous mansion outside of the city limits, and if I hadn't grown up there, I would have found the experience much more magical. But it was home, and to a certain extent, home was comfortable. At the very least, I could burrow into my parents' arms where everything was safe, or so I thought. When I arrived, my dad greeted me at the entrance with a big hug. I rested my head on his chest and breathed in his cologne. Then a crash from the kitchen sent my attention across the hall. My mom walked out, her typically perfect hair disheveled. Her mouth was stained a deep purple, and her eyelids were drooping. Your mother has had a little too much to drink, my dad said nonchalantly. The wine is supposed to go in the food, Alice, not in your mouth. Fuck off. my mom retorted as she stormed back into the kitchen. She was usually so put together. It was strange seeing her this way. I knew she drank more than the average middle-aged woman, but she didn't have to work. Every day was like a vacation to her. "Come sit," my dad said, motioning to the couch like nothing was wrong. "Tell me about work." "It's fine, I guess," I said. "It's a lot of hard work, though." "I'm so proud of you," he said, giving my shoulder a squeeze. "But if you ever decide it's too much for you, I have some money set aside with your name on it that will last you quite some time." "Thanks, Dad, but I don't need it. I want to be a nurse. I really love it, but I'm just adjusting to my new schedule now." "Okay," he said, patting my knee. "If you change your mind, you can always come back home. Maybe you can talk some sense into that mother of yours." My ears perked up. "What do you mean?" My mother had always been extremely practical and level-headed despite her lifestyle. Ever since I came along, she's stayed at home. Even after hiring cleaning staff and nannies for me, she's never really had a career of her own. She just never really needed to get a job. I never really asked her if she was happy this way. "She's been a mess lately," my dad said softly, "drinking too much and yelling at me. The other day, she got so drunk that she fell down and hit the kitchen counter. Her eyes swelled up like a balloon, all black and blue. Can you believe that?" "Seriously?" "I'm afraid so," he sighed. I heard my mom coming around the corner, but that didn't stop my dad from going on with this story. "I keep thinking, maybe if Sierra were here, she wouldn't act this way. She'd try to set a good example for her only child, I don't know what to do with her anymore. She's become difficult to deal with. I think it would really help her if we sent her to some rehab program upstate. She can have a little rest away from the booze, and maybe not act this way when she gets back." My mom glared at him, her wine glass in hand. With a sudden burst of rage, she smashed it to the ground. "Do you know what would fix me?" she growled, pointing her long manicured nail at my father. "A divorce!" She stomped away, leaving the shards of broken glass on the floor. I rushed over to clean them up, in case she came storming back in. "Leave it, Sierra," my dad said wearily. "It's not your mess to clean up." "It's always been my mess to clean up," I said under my breath. My biological need to take care of others was the reason why I became a nurse in the first place. I had something to offer people, whether it was my intelligence, my caring, or my cool head in a crisis. I wanted to give people everything I had when they needed it the most. But sometimes I wish there was someone to take care of me, too. "She's not serious, Sierra," my dad said, a grim expression on his face. "She gets this way when she drinks. You know that." "I'm not sure that I did know that," I answered. My mom drank, but I had never seen her this upset before. Why would she say she wanted a divorce if she didn't mean it? I felt tears well up in my eyes, but I didn't want my dad to see. I hated being vulnerable, a trait that I no doubt inherited from him. "I'm going to make sure the food isn't burning," I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking. "Good thinking," he replied. "I think your mom went upstairs to rest for a little bit. We'll let her sleep for an hour or so, and then she'll be just fine. Besides, you might be an even better cook than your mom," he said with a wink. "I learned it from you," I returned with a half smile. Once I was in the safety of the kitchen, I let a few tears loose and wiped them with the back of my hand. Now that my parents were a mess, there was no way I could tell them about my secret. I'd have to hold on to this one and wait for a better time to tell them about it. I just hoped that time would come soon. I hated keeping secrets. Fate, Apollo. When the driver stopped at a humongous house on the outside of town, I knew that we had arrived at Giorgio D'Angelo's home. It was bigger than every other house on the block, and it made me hate him even more. Some people worked hard for their money. Others just sat idle by and waited until their parents' money magically entered their bank account. What Giorgio D'Angelo did was worse. He bullied and threatened people into giving him money to buy ridiculous properties to flaunt his wealth and power to the world. Just as he instructed, I waited at the back door of his house with John for him to come get me. No matter what I was doing, there was always waiting involved. I was getting really tired of it. Finally, Giorgio opened the door to his back garden and greeted us like old friends. He leaned over to mutter a few words in John's ear, and then John turned around and left, returning to his car. We were alone. My hand slipped into the pocket of my jeans, filling the knife I had purchased the night before. I wondered if today would be the day to seek my revenge. "How's the apartment?" Giorgio asked me, the smug look on his face wanting me to be impressed. I couldn't be rude to him, but I didn't want him to think I was so floored by his generosity either. "It's good," I said casually. "The TV has a lot of channels." He laughed. "I'm glad to hear it. I need you to follow me to my study so I can tell you about your new job. We must be quiet, though. My wife is sleeping in the bedroom upstairs, and she is not pleasant when she gets woken up." I dropped the knife. I couldn't kill a man when his wife was at home. How terrible would it be for her to wake up to find her husband covered in blood? I didn't know the lady, but I bet I would be doing her a favor in the long run. Still, I couldn't make that call. Not yet, anyway. Giorgio's office was lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound books that he probably never read. Like everything else in his life, it was all for show. His grand study probably went unused most of the time. I sat in an oversized armchair across from his desk. It felt strange being so formal about a job that would probably require me to punch people in the face. "Here's the thing," Giorgio said to me. "I need you to act as a bodyguard for a little while. I've gotten word that my daughter has some sort of relationship with a guy while she was on vacation. From what I heard, he's probably no good, so I want to ensure that he doesn't pop back into her life, okay?" "What do you need me to do?" I asked. This job seemed ridiculous to begin with. How old was his daughter that she needed someone to make sure the guy she liked didn't call her back? "Keep an eye on her. If you notice that she's talking to any guy who looks a little rough, let me know. Basically, don't let any guy come near her. If anyone gets too close to my little girl, you have my permission to break his balls. Got it?" I nodded. "Sounds simple enough." "Perfect," he smiled. "I knew I could count on you. I've always employed people close to my daughter to watch out for her, but she's older now, and she's caught on to what I'm doing. I thought it would be better if I hired someone she didn't know. But if she asks, I'm going to tell her that there are people unhappy with me and that she might be in danger. You cannot tell her that this is over some dirtbag from the desert. Got it?" "Got it," I echoed. "Good. I'll take you to meet her. She's in the kitchen finishing up dinner." I followed him through the labyrinth of hallways until we reached the kitchen. A short girl with long curly hair stood in front of the oven with her back turned to us. After everything I learned about Giorgio over the years, I bet that this daughter was a real piece of work. I knew that this job would be the worst one yet. "Darling, I want you to meet someone," Giorgio said in a sickly sweet voice. "This is Apollo. He's going to be your new bodyguard for a short while." The girl swung around to face me and dropped her oven mitts on the ground. My hands started shaking uncontrollably when I saw her face. Giorgio D'Angelo's daughter was Sierra from the tattoo parlor. I had one of the best nights of my life with Sierra D'Angelo, heiress to the D'Angelo family mob. "Dad," she hissed, "what's going on?" I tried not to make eye contact with her. If Giorgio had found out that I was the one he wanted to protect her from, he would surely kill me. Then all of the hard work I'd done over the past month would be for nothing. I silently pleaded with her to keep quiet. I think she felt the gravity of the situation from her end too, because she avoided my eyes. "Is dinner ready?" Giorgio asked, as if nothing had happened. "Yes," Sierra stuttered. "Good," he replied. "I'll get your mother. Set the table for 4. Apollo's going to eat with us." Never in my life had I felt so uncomfortable before. and I had been in prison for 5 years. There was nowhere to go, though. I was trapped. If I didn't do this job, this meaningless job, then I'd be caught. Sierra waited until her father was out of earshot before whispering to me. "What's going on?" she asked, panic in her eyes. I shrugged. "I can't really explain." Her dad replied with a thin, drowsy woman. Apollo, this is Alice. Alice, this is the man that's going to be watching after our daughter." "Why do I need someone to watch me?" Sierra said, serving up portions of her pasta dish. "I'm an adult. I don't think this is really necessary." "There are dangerous people out there," Giorgio replied. "These people want to try to scare me, and you're my most valuable treasure. Apollo's just going to hang around to make sure none of these psychos get too close." Sierra opened her mouth and closed it again. She looked defeated. I wondered if this was a constant in her life. As different as my upbringing was from hers, I felt like she had it much worse. I didn't have a lot of money, but at least I didn't have to spend life wondering if someone was spying on me. I felt really sorry for her. But then again, if I didn't have to turn to a life of crime to make ends meet, then I wouldn't be in charge of protecting the boss's daughter from myself. It was a strange position to be in. We ate dinner in uncomfortable silence, Giorgio completely oblivious to what was happening at his own table. If he could be this blind to what was going on right in front of him, I still had a little hope that I could make it out of this mess alive. What I didn't expect was for Sierra to look so displeased. Once the initial shock wore off, I thought she would at least be a little happy to see me. Instead, she wore a scowl on her face that frightened me a little. Before we parted ways in Vegas, I let her know that I didn't have any intentions of making our hookup more than it really was. But I thought she agreed that it would never work and that we left on good terms. Apparently, she was still holding a grudge. While I did think about her from time to time, there was definitely no way that we could make it work now. I would complete this job with the least amount of contact I could give to make it seem convincing, and then I would get the hell out of her way. This was more complicated than a one-night stand. This was life and death. Kissing her, Sierra. I couldn't even look at Apollo throughout the entire meal. I had completely lost my appetite, but I didn't want my parents to think that something was up. I did my best to hide my scowl, but it was difficult. I was pissed. If Apollo worked for my dad, then there was no way he didn't know who I was. I knew for a fact that my dad talked about me to his friends and employees a lot. So when Apollo saw me at the tattoo parlor, there was no doubt in my mind that he knew I was Giorgio D'Angelo's daughter. This angered me for multiple reasons. First, it felt creepy and gross for him to go after his boss's daughter. I was interested in him because he was a total stranger. When I talked to him, I knew that there was a good chance that I'd never see him again. That was part of the appeal. As one of my father's employees, he knew there was a good chance he'd see me again. Even if he didn't know that he would be assigned to work as my bodyguard, there was a chance that we'd run into each other at some point in the future. Also, he knew who I was, yet told me that he wasn't interested in keeping in contact because he knew we'd never meet again. He fed me that line about seeing each other as if it was meant to be. Obviously, we'd see each other again, and it still wasn't meant to be. As much as I tried to hide it, I think it was clear that I was into him and that I wanted to see him again. Finally, there was a chance that he was sent to Las Vegas to spy on me. Everything about his apartment was suspicious. He had no good explanation for why he didn't have any belongings at his place. I can understand being poor or selling your things and disappearing, but he took it to a whole new level. I knew that my dad owned a lot of properties, big and small, around the country. It was all too likely that my dad let Apollo crash at that little apartment in order for him to keep a close watch on him. It was just coincidence that I found him attractive and had the nerve to ask him out. If he were working as a bodyguard, then it was highly unprofessional to fuck the person you're supposed to be protecting. Maybe that was why he looked so sheepish. He didn't want my dad to find out that he had sex with me. I knew my dad well, and I knew he would lose his shit if he ever found out that Apollo and I had sex multiple times. I had so many questions for Apollo, but I didn't know if I could face him. Looking him in the eye was proving to be challenging at the moment. Then there was the biggest problem of it all. I was pregnant with his baby. As much as I wanted to find him to tell him, eventually I convinced myself that it was better off if I never found him. In my mind, Apollo was still a good guy who didn't need to have his world turned upside down by a baby. I was going to let him off the hook. Now he was sitting right in front of me, and I wasn't sure if I could tell him. With any luck, my dad would come to his senses and let Apollo go. Hopefully, he would send him back to Vegas, and I'd never have to see him again. I really liked the Apollo I met in Las Vegas, but it just hurt too much to see him now. "That was a wonderful meal, ladies," my dad said, turning on the charm. "I need to go take care of some business, but I hope you can come back soon, Sierra." "I will," I said softly. My mom was drifting off in her chair. I couldn't stand to see my parents this way. "Apollo, will you escort my daughter home?" "No, Dad, it's really not necessary." "Listen to me, Sierra," my dad interrupted. He was always kind to me, but when he was giving orders, I knew to listen. "Fine," I groaned. "Good girl." I picked up my handbag and stormed out the front door without saying goodbye. I realized I was being immature, but I didn't care. I was tired of being treated like a child. Apollo followed 2 steps behind me, getting into my passenger seat. "Where are you going?" I shouted into my steering wheel. "I have to follow orders," he said, sounding tired. "Did your orders include going to Vegas to spy on me, but also fuck me?" "No," he exclaimed, looking shocked. "What kind of person do you think I am?" "I have no idea," I yelled. "Honestly, I don't even know your last name. I didn't know that you worked for my dad, but I have a sneaking suspicion that you knew all too well and took advantage of me." "Nano," he said softly. "What?" I asked, turning to him. "That's my last name. I didn't know what yours was until tonight." "Bullshit. You don't have to believe me. I'm not going to argue with you. You're acting like a child. Do you think I want to be doing this?" I clenched my teeth. How am I supposed to know? I'm just so confused and upset, and I couldn't continue. My throat felt constricted and hot tears poured down my face. I was so embarrassed and hurt, but I couldn't make them stop. "Hey," he said gently, "calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down," I retorted. "In fact, don't tell me anything." I started crying harder until it was hard to breathe. I took deep, jagged breaths, trying to force air into my lungs. Suddenly, Apollo's hands grabbed my cheeks and pulled my face toward his. He kissed me softly on the lips, then released me. By that time, my breathing had gone back to normal. Despite my better judgment, I felt better, calmer. "Can you drive now?" he asked. I nodded, sniffling. "Go to your place, and then I'll call a cab and leave. I'll give you all the space you need, but I have a job to do. If I can't do my job, I'm going to be in big trouble with your father. I think you will be too. Is that what you want?" "No," I pouted, heading down the street. "Then it's settled. I don't care if you like me, but we have to find a way to make this work. I came here to do a job, not to get into a forbidden relationship." When we got back to my place, I offered to let him wait inside, but he refused. So I walked inside and watched him wait on the edge of the street from my window. I thought I would feel relief when his cab sped away, but it just made me feel lonelier. Thankfully, no one else was at home when I returned. I wasn't in the mood to talk, and I had cried enough in front of others, more than I wanted to. I went to bed that night, hoping that it would all turn out to be a weird nightmare, and that I'd wake up in the morning with no recollection of Apollo Nano. Protection. Apollo. Sleep did not come easy that night. I laid awake with so many questions. How did I sleep with a girl and not even learn her last name? At the time, it was kind of sexy. She was a complete stranger, and I could use her incredible body to get off a few times and then get on with my life. If I could have gone back in time and asked her a few more questions about herself, I absolutely would have. I made a mental note to vet all future sexual partners, just in case they happened to be connected to any enemies of mine. I knew that Giorgio could stick me with a difficult task, but I didn't know it would be an impossible one. The thing that frightened me the most is that I didn't know who I could trust. Giorgio had hundreds of employees out there, and the second one found out what I was up to, I'd be dead. For Giorgio to know that Sierra hooked up with some guy that seemed rough around the edges was worrisome to me. I was also positive that he was talking about me. I didn't feel like she was the type to hook up with strangers. Also, I know that I don't fit the picture of the perfect boy to take home to mom and dad. I have way too many tattoos, dress too casually, and I don't put off the vibe that I'm a friendly person. I'm not a complete asshole, but I don't try very hard to keep a good reputation. If Giorgio knows about me, that means that there was someone in Vegas that saw us together. It could be anyone, though. It could have been the tattoo artist, a bartender, or even one of her friends. I couldn't be too careful. I needed to follow Sierra around town in order to fulfill my work duties, but I couldn't let anyone see me with her. Giorgio had spies everywhere. While I was riding with Sierra in her car, I managed to sneak a copy of her work schedule out of her car. Now I could account for her whereabouts for at least half the day. I got the feeling she was a homebody, so the other half she would likely spend at home. An hour before her shift started, I borrowed a car from one of Giorgio's men and parked it half a block away from her apartment. Sure enough, she left especially early for work, so I followed her the short distance to the hospital. Once there, I parked as far away from the entrance as I could and watched. Then came the worst part of surveillance, the waiting. Because I was the person who was meant to be dangerous, I didn't feel like she really needed me to be there. But in the event that something went wrong, I didn't want Giorgio to find out that I went to the tattoo parlor during my job. Fortunately, the hospital had their own gym, so I signed up for a membership using a fake name and killed a few hours lifting weights. That way, if Giorgio found out, I could tell him that I was closer to her there than I would be in my car. I could only work out for so long before my muscles ached, so once I was finished, I trudged back to my car and waited. I woke from an unintentional nap around 6, right when her shift was supposed to end. I scanned the parking lot, but her car was gone. Now I was panicking. If I lost Sierra and something happened to her, I would be in such deep shit. She knew that whether she liked it or not, I was supposed to follow her. She could have at least given me a heads up that she was going home. Hoping that she went straight home, I drove in that direction, silently pleading for her to be there. When I pulled up to her apartment, I saw her car in the lot, but I didn't know if anyone else was in there with her. It would be a huge gamble to knock on the door to find out, but I needed to talk to her. I tentatively tapped on the door, ready to bolt if I saw anyone else. I waited, my pounding heart shaking my entire body. "What do you want?" she sighed. "Is there anyone else here?" I whispered. "No, the others have the night shift tonight. I'm here alone." I breathed a sigh of relief. "I need to talk to you. Can I come in?" "Is this really necessary? I can tell my dad that you never leave my sight all day if that will make you happy. Is that what you want?" I frowned. "That's not what I want. If you'd let me come inside for a few minutes, we can figure something out that will work for both of us. I don't want to bother you, and I get the feeling you don't want to ruin my life either." She scowled and pulled the door open a little wider. I took this as an invitation to enter and followed her down the hallway into the living room. Her apartment was almost as nice as my New York apartment. It made sense, though if one roommate was a D'Angelo and another was being paid by one. Otherwise, I doubted that anyone their age could afford anything that spacious. "What do you want to say?" Sierra asked, crossing her arms. I sat down on her couch. I didn't want her to think that I would just say my piece and then leave. I needed her to understand where I was coming from. "Look, I don't know if you realize this, but you might not be as safe as you think you are." "How so?" "I've heard the whole bit about my dad having dangerous enemies before." It's true. I've met people who really want to do harm to him. This goes beyond spying on you. It probably wouldn't hurt to have a little extra protection. And you're going to do that? There's something you don't know, I said, wringing my hands. She raised an eyebrow, finally interested in what I had to say. While I really do think it's a good idea to have a little extra protection, your dad didn't hire me to keep you safe from his enemies. No? Then whom does he want you to keep me safe from? I took a deep breath. There was no going back once I told her my secret. She could either help me or rat me out. I wasn't quite sure which way she would go. Sierra, your dad wants you to be protected from me. Unexpected news. Sierra. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice quivering. I don't know how, but your dad knows that you became involved with some guy during your vacation. Unless you had a really good time, I think that means me. When he hired me for this job, he specifically told me that if I see this guy from Vegas trying to reach out to you, that I'm supposed to stop him with force. My hands covered my gaping mouth. This is what I get for trying to have fun for once in my life. This is such bullshit. I never asked for this. Apollo looked nervous. He clearly wasn't used to dealing with angry women. I'm sorry this happened, but you understand why this is a problem for me. Yes, but I just want to be left alone. You have no idea how much things have sucked since I left you in Vegas. I tried so hard to forget you, but I just can't. Now you're here, and it makes it impossible to get you out of my mind. Can you just leave me alone? No, he said firmly, looking straight into my eyes. I was taken aback. There was no reason for him to stick around, now that I knew that this job was meaningless. Excuse me? I'm not going to leave you alone. I don't want that, and I don't think you really mean it either. I don't know what came over me, but I lunged at him. My closed fist made contact with his chest, but once I was on top of him, I had a sudden change of heart. Instead of hitting him, I kissed him, forcing my mouth onto his. He immediately pulled me closer, our bodies pressing together. I felt so comfortable with Apollo that I didn't even have to think about what I was doing. I just let my clothes fly off my body as our tongues danced around each other. I felt his pants bulge against me, and I thrust my hand down the front of his jeans. His member was rock hard, and it was all mine. I unbuttoned his fly, and without waiting for his instructions, took him into my mouth. I gripped his thighs as I moved up and down, looking up to watch his facial expressions. For a man who always seemed to be in control, he allowed himself to relax and enjoy his pleasure. I wanted to make him finish, but once he got close, he pushed me away and grabbed me by the armpits, hoisting me up like I was weightless. It made me feel good to be with a guy who could handle me. Apollo flipped me to the opposite side of the couch, onto my back. He hovered over me, a look of concentration on his face. He wanted me so badly, he could hardly wait to enter me. His smooth chest grazed mine, the friction making my nipples stand up. Every caress of his skin against mine made me feel closer and closer to him, until it felt like we were one. I had never experienced the feeling of complete trust with anyone until that moment. If he wanted to follow me around, I would let him, especially if it meant we would be doing this more often. My breathing moans excited him more, and he thrust harder and deeper inside of me before erupting. Instead of rolling off of me and getting dressed, he was still. His ear rested on my chest, where my heart beat inside of me. Something had changed with Apollo, too. He was quieter, gentler with me than before. It was as if a layer of his hard shell had been shed from his exterior. Suddenly, he seemed more human and less like a representation of the small part of me who wanted to rebel. Fortunately, my roommates wouldn't be back until late. Knowing this, we took full advantage of our time alone, exploring each other's bodies in every part of the apartment. After the fourth time, I had to throw in the towel. I was exhausted. I watched from my bed as Apollo took a shower in my bathroom. I made him leave the door open because I couldn't get enough of his gorgeous body. He didn't mind. I think he secretly liked the attention I was giving him. What shocked me the most was that after he got dressed, he joined me in my bed, pulling the covers up over our shoulders. I thought you didn't cuddle, I noted. I don't, he replied. But you wore me out, girl. I need to rest for a little bit before I go. Can I ask you something? I asked. Sure. When I left, did you really think that there was a chance we'd ever meet again? He thought for a moment before answering. Honestly, no. When you think about how many people there are in the world, there's virtually no chance that we'd run into each other again. You live in New York, and I want to live anywhere but here. Yet, here you are. Here I am. His finger traced my lips as I studied his serious face. Are you happy to see me? He frowned. It's more complicated than that. My heart fell. I was really hoping for a different answer. You see, he continued, there's something I need to do. I can't tell you what it is, only that you cannot be involved. Does it have anything to do with my father and his business? I asked. His face stayed blank. I'm just trying to make a little money so I can get my life in order. You probably don't know this, but my dad has worked for your dad in the past. Do I know him? If you don't know me, then you probably don't know him. It doesn't really matter, though. All that matters is that we'll never be anything more than this. I felt my lip tremble. I tried to hold it together and act cool. It has nothing to do with you. I think you're really cool, but I just can't be with someone right now. Not even me? I feel something when I'm with you. Don't you feel that too? He hesitated for a while, keeping me in suspense. I don't know what I feel. I only know what I know. He pulled back the covers and got out of bed. Wait, I breathed. Where are you going? This was a mistake. I mean, it was great, but it was probably a mistake. It's best if we keep things professional until we can both get out of this situation. But we have a connection, I shouted after him. I'm sorry, Sierra. He continued walking out the door. I couldn't let him leave, not again. There were too many things that would be left unsaid if he walked out now. It wasn't just about sex anymore. I was falling for him. Wait, I yelled. I have to tell you something. No, Sierra, he said, sounding forlorn. I'm pregnant with your baby. He stopped, dead in his tracks, but didn't turn around. I wanted to see his face so I could gauge his reaction. Apollo? I squeaked out after a few long moments. How do you know? He asked, his back still toward me. I haven't slept with anyone besides you. I got a blood test done. It can only be yours. It's not, he said. It's just not. Look at me, I ordered, startling myself with my own strength coming from inside. Finally, he turned to face me, a strange look of sadness and anger on his face. What do you want me to do, Sierra? He sighed. If you want me to stay with you and take care of the baby, I just can't. If you want me to try to send you money, I'll do my best. But I don't have any money as it is. If you ever want to tell your father, he will surely kill me. Oh, don't be so dramatic, I said. No one's going to kill you. He grimaced. You don't understand, Sierra, and you never will. You have no idea how hard it's been to keep this a secret, and have no idea where the hell you are, I shouted. How am I supposed to do all this on my own? It's not fair. You're just as responsible for this as I am. I know, he said, rubbing his stubble against his palms. This doesn't change anything, though. I still have to carry out my plans. There is no situation where this works out between us. In a perfect world, I would take you and the baby far away from here, and we'd make a great life with one another. But it isn't a perfect world, Sierra. It's a terrible place, where unjust things happen every day. I'm just trying to correct one wrong. There's nothing else I can do. He ended his rant with a strangled cry as he buried his face in his hands. Then, before the emotions overtook him, he turned around again and left for good. Nothing about what he told me made sense, except the fact that the world was an unjust place. I was too young to have to worry about bringing a child into this world alone. I was too well behaved to have these kinds of problems. It was unfair that the one man I truly cared for could never be with me. I had run out of tears to cry. I would no longer go back and forth with Apollo Nano, hating him one moment and loving him the next. I would never move on if I couldn't detach myself from the tiny bit of hope that I reserved for him. It was time, once and for all, to say goodbye to the man from the tattoo parlor. My fingers traced the tiny bird on my wrist. One day my unborn child would ask me about it, and I would tell them the story of how their father made the biggest mistake of his life. By then, I hoped that the memory would no longer hurt so much. Quitting. Apollo. Just when I thought my situation couldn't get any worse, it did exponentially. I couldn't be with Sierra, nor could I take care of a child. Not when they both belonged to Giorgio anyway. What made things worse was that I did feel a connection to Sierra. She was so kind and cute, and if I could see myself making a life with anyone, it would be her. She was smart and cool, and most importantly, she knew who I was and still wanted to be with me. I liked her enough that it really tore me up inside that she was carrying my child. I wasn't ready to be a father now, but I had always imagined I would be someday. I wanted to provide for someone who needed me and give them a better life than I had. My parents did everything they could for me, but it's not easy when one parent is doing bitch work for the mob and the other has to stay home to take care of their children. For a moment in Sierra's apartment, I imagined the two of us living in a house in a small city with our baby. She could find a hospital to work at, and I'd find a bike shop. It would be a lot of hard work to start all over, but we could do it. But that could never work if her father was still in the picture. That was my next conundrum. I was so set on killing Giorgio as soon as I possibly could, but I knew that it would devastate Sierra. Even though he was a deplorable human being, she still loved him. I couldn't take her father away from her. If I didn't, everything that I had been working for would be wasted. I could try to leave the mob, but that wasn't easy. My dad tried to leave on numerous occasions, but always got sucked back in, whether through the threat of violence or with cash. I wasn't sure what I would have to do to free myself from the mess I was in. There really wasn't a good option, and I had thought of 100 of them. To make matters worse, I had a meeting scheduled with Giorgio at his house the next morning. He thought it was a good idea to have regular meetings for me to report on his daughter's whereabouts. I thought the whole thing was creepy and weird, and I wanted to punch his stupid face every time he talked about her. She deserved so much better, but I couldn't tell her whom to love. Not knowing what to do with all of my energy when I got back to my stupid rich apartment, I opened the fridge and cracked open a beer. When I finished the first one, I opened another and another until my brain stopped screaming. The alcohol helped subdue my racing mind, but it did nothing for my unstable emotions. As someone who rarely felt anything but rage, I was confused by what I was feeling. Alongside the anger was a large helping of despair. It didn't matter what I did. Nothing would go right for me anyway. I drank until I fell asleep on the fancy couch, relieved to have a break from my problems. Morning came too soon, though, and I felt just as conflicted, but now with a hangover. "Hello, Apollo," Giorgio said, with a shit-eating grin when he answered his door. "Hello, Giorgio," I said, gripping his hand. It took all of my strength not to slash his wrists right there and then. "Come in," he said. "We can talk in my office." If I hadn't been watching where I was going, I would have stepped on Alice D'Angelo. She was sprawled out on the floor, her cheek shiny and red. I jumped back, startled by her haggard appearance. A sweaty sheen covered her face and neck, and her hair was a mess. It looked like she had been in a fight. "Alice, for God's sake," Giorgio said in a stern voice. "Go upstairs and clean yourself up. We have company." She muttered something under her breath and got up, limping up the stairs and out of sight. "So," Giorgio said brightly, "where were we?" "Is she okay?" I asked. "Alice? Yeah, she's fine. She's been a real nightmare lately. It makes me really miss having Sierra at the house. She always kept the peace, my Sierra. Such a sweetheart. I nodded in agreement. Sierra was a sweet girl, and it made following her so much harder. "Speaking of Sierra," he said, sinking down into his desk chair, "what have you noticed about her?" Now was my time to lie. I needed to tell him enough for him to believe that I was really watching her, and something boring enough to keep the both of us out of trouble. "I've been spending time outside of the hospital, keeping an eye on her. When I've asked around, it doesn't sound like she does anything other than work. Doesn't really use her phone or talk to people while she's there. She hasn't been anywhere besides the hospital, her apartment, and the grocery store once or twice this week." "Good," he mused. "Has anyone been over to her house?" "Not when Sierra's been there, except for the roommates." He nodded, pleased with himself. "Is there any reason to believe that a man has gotten into contact with her?" I dug my short fingernails into my palm. "I don't see how that would be possible. I haven't noticed anything of the sort." "Good work, Apollo," he said, standing up abruptly. "Let's do another week of close surveillance, and then we'll reevaluate. I'm sure you've enjoyed your time with Sierra, but I think there are bigger jobs for you to work on next. How does that sound?" "Great," I said, my stomach churning with rage. "I'll keep in touch. You can see yourself out." I walked stiffly toward the door, knowing that if I thought about it too much, I'd send my fist through his face. This was not the time or the place to blow my cover. I had to keep cool. As I pulled the door close, I heard Giorgio shouting at his wife again. Something told me that her injuries had nothing to do with her drinking. Coming clean, Apollo. The following week, I did the bare minimum of surveillance I could get away with. I didn't want to get myself into a situation where I had to speak to Sierra. At this point, there was nothing I could say to make things better for either of us. That didn't stop her from trying, though. Somehow, she managed to get the number to my burner phone and called at least once a day. On occasion, she'd leave me messages and plead with me to call her back. I deleted each one. It was better that way. I lazily drove from her house to work at the corresponding hours just to make sure she was at one of those places. If she wasn't, I'd cruise around for an hour or so, and she'd turn up, right where she was supposed to be. When I had just 2 more days until my next meeting with Giorgio, she left me a message that I couldn't ignore. "Apollo," she said, her voice full of anxiety, "I understand that you're ignoring me to protect yourself, but I'm really scared and have no one to turn to. I'm thinking about telling my dad everything just to get it off my chest. At least he'll help me. Please call me back. I'm running out of options." When I heard that, I got into my car and sped to her house. Not caring that her roommates could be home, I knocked on the door. Felicity answered, but I didn't think that she recognized me. She was pretty far gone when we briefly met. "Is Sierra here?" I asked. "I need to speak with her." She gave me a quizzical look. Of course, Sierra wouldn't have a man over so late. That would be out of character to her. "I work with her dad," I added, hoping it would make more sense to her. "Sierra?" she called down the hall. "You have a visitor." Sierra came out into the hall, wearing a pink tracksuit. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Oh," she said, her eyes darting from Felicity and back to me. "I forgot you were picking me up," she said, thinking on the spot. "I'll see you later, Felicity. I'm going to watch a movie at my parents' house tonight." "Have fun, weirdo," she said, walking back toward her room. "I can't believe you came," she whispered as she shut the front door. "Where are we going?" "Let's go for a drive," I said. "You're scaring me with all that talk about going to your father about this." "I didn't know what else to say," she said, getting into my car. She had a horrified expression on her face. I tried to soften my tone. "Do you really think that your father is a kind and generous man?" She looked at me and then back at the ground. "He is to me, at least. But I have suspected that he's only that way with me. Am I right?" I sighed and nodded, looking straight ahead at the road. "What do you know?" she asked hesitantly. "I'm afraid to tell you. First of all, I don't know if you'll believe me. If I were in your shoes, I wouldn't want to believe any of it. Secondly, if you do believe it, you will never see that man the same way ever again. Can you handle it?" She was silent. "I think you know more than you let on. Am I right?" She nodded. Do you really want me to tell you what I know? Yes, she said so softly I could hardly hear her. I'm going to tell you about my personal relationship with your father. You see, my dad worked for yours for many years. In fact, he still gets called in to do the odd job every now and then. I already knew that, though. You told me the other week. Yes, but I didn't give you the specifics. The reason you've never heard of my dad is because he's not in your dad's inner circle. In fact, your dad has been treating my dad like absolute shit for about as long as I've been alive. How do you know that? I could hear the doubt settling in already. Years ago, before you were born, my father had a short fling with your mother. In fact, it was only a little more than a friendship. But your dad found out and promised to make my dad's life hell. He succeeded, too. He paid him little for tough jobs, and when he tried to leave, he was threatened. Then my mom and I entered the picture, and our lives were threatened, too. But my dad was never a smart man and just took it. He had a good enough life away from his work that it made it all worthwhile. He had my mom and he had my siblings and me. Everything else was a little more bearable with a good family. I looked over at her. She was looking pale. My dad's happiness in life finally caught up with him 5 years ago. Apparently your old man had finally had enough. He just couldn't knock my dad down for good. So he set him up and got him arrested for money laundering. My dad was probably involved in some regard, but not fully to blame. My dad put your dad in jail? She gasped. I shook my head. No, I knew that if my dad went away for too long, it would destroy our family. I went to the police station, confessed to the crime, and served 5 years for something I had nothing to do with. You went to prison? I just got out. In fact, we met on my first day out. You were my sweet taste of freedom that I had longed for too long. Why would he do that? She asked, her eyes shiny with tears. You did nothing wrong. That's just how it goes when you get sucked into one of these businesses, Sierra. I'm sure you've noticed how rough things can get. Have you ever noticed that your dad has a bad temper? I watched her face change with the realization of all the signs she overlooked over the years. As much as I pitied my family for what they'd been through, I felt terrible for her. Do you think he's done this to other people? She asked, looking for a sliver of hope that her father wasn't a complete monster. I'm afraid he's done much worse. If he didn't do it himself, he's ordered the beatings and murders of people who didn't listen to him or pay their debts to him. Unfortunately, this happens all the time, but he's so powerful and rich that he never gets pinned for it. By now, tears were falling freely down her cheeks. I placed my free hand on her thigh. I'm sorry you're just hearing this now, I said gently. You don't deserve this. I'm sorry this happened to you, she sniffled. I knew that what my father did wasn't always illegal, but I hate to think of him hurting anyone. You've seen how good he is to me. I know, I replied. He loves you. It just so happens that you're the only one in the world he's good to. And my mom, she added with a sniff. I bit my lip. Now wasn't a good time to tell her what I saw the last time I was at her house. But there was never a good time to talk about those kinds of things. Sierra, I said cautiously. Oh, God, she moaned. What else do you know? I slid my hand from her thigh to her hand, interlacing my fingers with hers. I was at your house a few days ago. I had a meeting with your dad. When I walked in, your mom was on the floor. She looked terrible, like she had been in a fight. There was a massive bruise forming on her face, and your dad didn't seem worried. When I left, I heard him yelling at her. Shit, she said. She's been drinking again. She must have fallen. I think she needs to see a therapist. No, Sierra, I interrupted. You're not hearing me. The mark on her face was left by a fist. How do you know? I sighed. I've been in a lot of fights. I know exactly what that looks like. I'm also positive your dad hit her. He wouldn't do that, she exclaimed, shaking my hand from hers. He would never hurt her. He loves her. Sierra, I said, placing my hand back on the wheel, do you think there's a chance that the idea of your father that you keep in your head is better than the one everyone else sees. At this, she broke down sobbing. Finally, she was able to see past the filter of the loving father and realize who he really was. It was heartbreaking to watch it all happen. It felt terrible to be the one to tell her in the first place. I pulled into a vacant parking lot, turned off the car, and held her in my arms until she caught her breath and the tears slowed. I rested my cheek against the top of her head, promising myself that I would do whatever it took to make her happy again. Just like with my own situation, Sierra D'Angelo didn't deserve to suffer for the sins of her father. She had too much going for her to get sucked into a life that only ended in destruction and misery, and I was going to get her out of it. "What do we do?" she cried, holding tight onto my hands. I kissed her on the top of her head. "That's what I've been trying to figure out for years." Never the plan. Sierra. To say that I was devastated would be an understatement. Sitting in Apollo's car, I wondered how it was possible that I was so blind to things I should have seen my entire life. I'd heard whispers from my dad's employees, but never looked into it any deeper. They spoke in code, and I was always too afraid to try to crack it. Even if I knew exactly what was going on, what difference would it make? My dad ran the mob, not some public office. I couldn't persuade him to completely give up his life of crime for me. I wasn't powerful like he was. I loved him, but I couldn't look at my father the same way anymore. Not when the people I cared about were being hurt by him. The thought of my father hurting my mother made me feel so sick. They had been together for so long, and I always thought they were the perfect example of what it meant to take wedding vows seriously. They fought on occasion, but they were always fine once supper time rolled around. All of my friends' parents were divorced. I always thought it was so great that mine were still together. Now I wish they weren't. "We need a plan," I said, wiping my tears from my face. Apollo lifted his head from mine. "I had a plan," he said slowly. "I have a feeling you're not going to like it, though." "I'm afraid to ask what it is," I said, turning to face him. "To be perfectly honest, I was planning on getting rid of him for good." "Killing him, you mean?" I said flatly. I knew the words I was saying, but they seemed so meaningless to me. "Yes." I thought about this proposal for a second. It would solve Apollo's problem, but it wasn't something I could have any part of. As much as I hated my dad at this very moment in time, I didn't want him dead. I just wanted Apollo, my mother, my unborn child, and me to be safe from him. That was all. "There's got to be another way," I pleaded. "You don't have to kill him." "What do you suggest, then? I don't want to hurt anyone. But for him, I'd make that exception." "What if we get him arrested like he did to your dad? He'll go to prison and then we'll be free to go on with our lives. I'm sure he'll be away for a long time, so we could leave and not have any contact with him again." The look he gave me immediately told me that my plan was naive and full of problems. I felt embarrassed that I even suggested it. "I don't mean we," I corrected. "You're free to do whatever you want, but everyone who has been hurt by my dad needs to be protected from him." "I agree," he said, "but I'm afraid an arrest won't stop him. Even if he manages to be convicted and go to prison, he has people on the outside that can come after us. It's a big risk." "If you kill him," I countered, "you've got the same people coming after you. But with this option, you don't have blood on your hands, and I'd be willing to help you." He thought for a moment, starting the car again. I could tell that he needed some time to clear his head, so I waited patiently, hoping that he would come around to my suggestion. If he decided he would still try to kill my dad, I wasn't sure if I could stay out of his way. I knew my father was a bad man, but he raised me. I knew him for all 22 years of my life. I only knew Apollo for less than 2 months, and most of the time we were completely out of contact. By the time we got back to my apartment, he was ready to speak again. He parked the car and turned to me, taking my hand in his. It sent butterflies through my body. I think you're right about needing a different plan, he said seriously, but I'm going to need your help. And we'll need your mom's help too. We have to be careful because there's so much at stake. Are you in? I took a deep breath. I would have to destroy my relationship with my father, but if I didn't, more lives would be in danger. It was the hardest decision I'd ever have to make. I'm in, I said carefully. I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you. I left Apollo in the car with a quick kiss goodbye. If I wanted to do this right, I would need to start working on my plan immediately. Blind Eye, Sierra. After my shift at the hospital, I texted my mom to tell her that I was stopping by the house. I knew that my dad had gone back to Las Vegas for a few days, so she would be there alone. It would be the perfect time to start testing the waters with her about leaving my father. Almost immediately, she responded, telling me that she wasn't feeling well and that I should come back another day. As a nurse, she should have known better to think that a claim of illness would keep me away. She was hiding something. I pretended to ignore her text and marched inside the house anyway, calling to her from the front door. Her car was in the driveway. She couldn't hide her secret from me much longer. Upon hearing my voice, I heard scampering sounds upstairs, so I ran to her room to see what she was doing. In the bathroom, she was quickly trying to apply concealer to a badly bruised and swollen eye. "Mom!" I exclaimed upon seeing her face. I wasn't trying to have a dramatic reaction, but even I was startled by how bad it was. "Calm down, Sierra," she said, shushing me. "I just had a little accident. Nothing to get worked up about." "Is Dad hitting you what you call a little accident?" I said coldly. She turned to me, a look of horror on her face. "How?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I said. "Why didn't you tell me?" She went over to her bed and sat down. I joined her, feeling sick. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. She bit her lip before speaking. "Around the time you moved out to go to nursing school. Things haven't been great for a long time, but they got a lot worse recently. I never wanted you to think that anything was wrong. You looked up to your father so much." My blood boiled. My whole life, I wanted to believe that my dad was a good person. So much so that everyone else got in on the cover-up. I felt like everything I knew was a lie. "You can't let him do that to you," I said, knowing that those words were meaningless. I'd seen abused women in the hospital before. Even if they wanted to get out, they still felt safer living with their abuser instead of trying to leave. Only I could help her. "I can handle it," she said. I went to the medicine cabinet and gathered the supplies I needed. I dabbed antibiotic ointment on her cuts and scrapes as I spoke. "Is this why you've been drinking so much lately?" "Yes. I found that if I'm good and drunk before he hits me, it doesn't hurt as much. A bottle of wine numbs my face just enough to tolerate it." My stomach lurched. "Mom, I've just recently found out about some of the things Dad has been doing to his employees over the years. Why didn't I know about it?" She let out a dry chuckle. "Sierra, I don't even know the half of it. We want to believe that the man we love would never do anything wrong. He runs the fucking mob. I should have never been involved with him. But when he was young, he was so sweet to me. He wasn't into that kind of stuff yet. Once I saw his true character, it was too late." "What do you mean?" "I was young when I had you. Your father was a traditional man and demanded that we get married. Who was I to say no? He had a lot of money, and I knew he would take care of the two of us. I was afraid, but I made it work so we could have stable lives." "And you never thought about leaving him?" "Oh, I did, all the time. Luckily for me, he bought those properties all over the place and went away on business. If he wasn't around, then it hardly felt like an issue. I didn't even care if he slept around while he was away. I liked having a little break from him. When he would return, I was well rested enough to be able to handle the temper. I really didn't mind because once things got bad again, he'd go back to Las Vegas." "You stayed because you could tolerate him?" I guess so. Plus, you know how angry he can get. What do you think he would have done if I would have asked for a divorce? It was a grim thought. She had basically suffered through decades of domestic abuse, mostly for my benefit. I wondered if I would ever be able to shake that guilt. You did this all for me? You can't blame yourself, she said, seeing right through me. At one point, I thought we'd have more children. I always wanted to give you a brother or sister. Why didn't you? She took a deep breath and looked at the floor. I was pregnant once. You were 3, and I just found out. I hadn't even told you yet. You were at your grandparents' house, and your father and I got into a big fight. He kicked the shit out of me, and I lost the baby. I clamped both hands over my mouth. When he found out what he had done, he was beside himself. The damage was so bad, I could never have kids again. I told the doctors that I had gotten into a car accident, so he wouldn't get into trouble. I thought that he felt too much remorse to ever lay a finger on me again. It worked for a while, but it didn't last long. This was the final straw. Any doubt I had about getting my dad locked up was gone. Now, this affected me personally. The sibling that I wanted so badly as a child was brutally murdered by my dad. If that didn't make matters bad enough, he also prevented my mother from having any more children. In the past, whenever I had asked her why she only had me, she said that I was all she needed. Now I knew the truth. She wanted more, but she had to make do with what she had. That's why I had been doted on for my entire life. I was their one chance. Feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders, I decided that I would tell my mom about Apollo. That way she would understand what needed to be done. I was scared to invite her into our conspiracy, but I felt like it was the right moment. Seeing her with her battered face, I knew that she wanted out of this life, just as much as Apollo and I did. I'm so sorry I didn't know, I said, resting my head on her shoulder. I should have known. I'm afraid I hid it well, she said, but now that you're old enough, I think it's time you knew the truth. I'm sorry you didn't find out about your father sooner. Mom, I said, feeling nervous, there's something I have to tell you. Anything, she said, stroking my face. It felt good to be in my mother's embrace. I told her everything, from my one-night stand in Las Vegas to Apollo's plans. She listened intently, but was never as shocked and surprised as I imagined she'd be. I suppose that after the life she lived, very little surprised her anymore. I talked to Apollo last night, I said. We're all in danger if Dad is still free to do whatever he wants. We need to get away from him. She nodded, looking at my belly. A tear came to her eye, and I wasn't sure what emotion it resulted from. Do you think you and Apollo have any chance of being happy together? If you're safe, can you have a good relationship? I don't know, I said. I want to, but I don't know if he does. I don't think he can think that far ahead when there's still so much at stake here. He'd be crazy not to want to be with you, she said, a crinkled smile appearing on her face. I laid down on the bed, resting my head in my mom's lap like I did when I was a kid. Don't worry, Sierra, she said, stroking my hair. I closed my eyes and enjoyed the sensation of her long fingernails raking through my hair. We'll figure something out. Will you help Apollo and me? I asked hopefully. I'll do anything to ensure that you have a better life than I did. Mom, I said, looking up at her, you're still so young. You have time to make a new life for yourself. She sighed and returned to massaging my scalp. Soon, you'll discover that when your child is in trouble, your needs hardly exist anymore. If you won't help yourself, I'll help you, I said defiantly. That's the sweet girl I know, she said softly, always taking care of others. You're going to make a fantastic mom. I know it's not the best timing, but I couldn't be prouder of you. You deserve the best in life, and I'll do whatever I can to make sure you get it. Will you help me with the baby? He or she will need their grandma. She playfully crinkled up her nose at the word, and we both burst into laughter. The situation was dire, but it felt good to have a moment alone with my mom. I wanted her to be healthy so we could have more of these moments. I need to go home now, I said, dreading leaving her alone. If Dad gets home and something happens, call me immediately. If things get really bad, call the police. Once the words came out of my mouth, I knew that she wouldn't do either of those things. Still, she agreed. Oh, and no more drinking, I said. Throw the bottles away if you have to. You need to be sharp so we can figure out how to get out of this mess. Okay, she said sadly. I wish you didn't have to go. These words felt like a dagger through my heart. I owed it to my mom to get her out of her abusive home. I'll be back soon. I love you. As I left my parents' house, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake by leaving her alone. I had little choice, though. I had to cover part of a shift at the hospital, and my patients needed me too. I thrived in these situations, but I hoped that it wouldn't stretch me past my breaking point. Everyone was counting on me. Saving her. Apollo. Giorgio was out of town for a few days, so Sierra and I used the time to work on our escape plan. Her roommates were on the same shift schedule, so she told them she was spending time at her mom's house when she was with me at the rented apartment. It was hard to make life-changing decisions together when all we wanted to do was sleep together. We let our guard down a few times and just did it. The tension was too thick. We were too distracted. Once we got that out of our system, we laid together in my bed, shooting ideas back and forth. You were right, by the way, she said, as she rested her head on my chest. My dad's been beating the shit out of my mom for years, she finally confessed. I'm sorry, I said, feeling uncomfortable. Is that why she said she'd help you? Yep. I'm just afraid that she's doing it all for me and not for herself. I'm really worried that she won't try to defend herself if my dad comes after her. She would be a prime suspect to be caught on. Can we send her somewhere while this all goes down? I suggested. I remember you saying something about rehab. No, I don't think she'd go anywhere willingly. She'd want to protect me. Is her drinking any better? I told her to throw away the bottles, but I don't think she did, she said glumly. That gave me a terrible idea. Sierra would never agree to it, though, but I knew it could work. I would have to go directly to Alice. Are you afraid she's going to get really sick? I asked casually. I don't even know how much alcohol it would take for someone to need medical attention. It depends, Sierra said, going into nurse mode. There are different signs to watch out for. Like what? Obviously, vomiting is never good. Most people don't realize that's a sign of alcohol poisoning. Of course, loss of consciousness is bad too, but what you really have to watch for is when breathing and heart rate get too slow. That's when it's really dangerous. So once they pass out, they might need to go to the hospital. To be safe, yes. Why are you so interested in this sort of thing? I came up with a bullshit excuse. I never went to college, remember? I don't really know how these things work. She rolled her eyes at me. Let's get back to planning, she said, giving me a playful nibble on my earlobe. Where do we want to go? I asked. We? I craned my neck to look at her. Yeah, I said matter-of-factly. That's all right, isn't it? She blushed. I didn't know you wanted to be with me. Of course I do. If we're going to flee the country, I'm going to need you by my side. Besides, you can't raise that baby all alone. So where are we going to go? She beamed, turning her head so I wouldn't see her smile. I saw it anyway, and it was contagious. I don't know. Where would you want to go if you were starting over? Greece, I said, without needing to think. My grandparents moved back there about 10 years ago. They used to send me postcards. I think I'd like to go there. Then Greece it is. I'm sure my mom would love the sun. My parents, too, I agreed. Hopefully they'll be able to come home after a few years of hiding out. If your dad goes away for a long time, the gang will start to dissolve. Someone else might take over, but it won't be the same. The same grudges just won't be there. She smiled. We can buy a little villa and watch the sunset from our balcony. It will be perfect. I closed my eyes and imagined it. I saw myself cooking in the kitchen while Sierra played with our beautiful baby. When the baby went to bed, we'd eat dinner outside as the sun set. Then we'd go inside and make love. We'd repeat this every day if we wanted to. After the horrendous past few years, it would be paradise. "Can you book the tickets?" I asked. "Your father is counting on me to notice these kinds of things to report to him. Besides, I don't have a lot of money. When should we leave?" I did the math in my head, trying to figure out how long it would take for this plan to come to fruition. 3 days from today. We made love again, this time knowing that there would be plenty more to come if it all went well. Still, I couldn't help but think that each time would be our last. Giorgio would never lay a finger on Sierra, no matter what he found out. I, on the other hand, had everything to lose. The next morning, while Sierra was at work, I paid a visit to Alice D'Angelo. I explained that we had a plan to leave, but we needed to ensure that she was safe while Giorgio went on his warpath. If he was arrested and he thought Alice was the cause of it, he'd send someone to the house to have her killed. I was sure of it. "Do you have any information that I could pass on to the police that would easily convict your husband of a large number of crimes?" I asked her after she let me into her house. "State or federal?" she asked. I grinned. She had heard so much over the years that she could provide a lead to just about every crime that her husband committed in the last 20 years. She found the key to his desk and found stacks of paperwork that showed that he owed millions in taxes. "Want me to make you a few copies?" she asked. As she was neatly stacking all the evidence we needed into a folder, I asked her if she would go along with my proposal for keeping her out of harm's way. She balked at first, but once I explained how it would help us all out, she agreed. That evening, she would start drinking in excess. I would arrive to make sure she wasn't in serious danger, but I would call an ambulance once she passed out. Then I would flee the scene. While she was in the hospital, Sierra and I would go to the police and rat out her father. Once he was arrested, we'd hop on a flight and never return. "You do realize that he'll probably get tipped off before he ends up in cuffs, right?" Alice asked. She'd seen this kind of thing happen all the time. "Yes, but by that time, we'll be out of reach. I really think we have enough to convict, don't you?" Alice looked at the floor, but I could see a tiny smile on her face. I knew that she was in. I went back to the apartment, feeling more optimistic than I had since I had gotten out of prison. In my hand was more than enough documents to put Giorgio away for long enough to establish a new life. Now I just hoped that Giorgio wouldn't catch on to what we were doing. His whole life was devoted to staying one step ahead of his enemies. We had a formidable opponent, but I had never been so motivated to do anything in my entire life. I knew that this situation could go one of two ways. Either we would defeat Giorgio, or Giorgio would defeat us. Either I would give Sierra her happily ever after, or I would be leaving her without a mother and partner. On my way home, I stopped at a payphone and requested a meeting with an officer to discuss potential gang activity. A new police chief was appointed recently, so I hoped it would work in our favor. Much to my surprise, I was given an appointment to meet with an officer on the gang crime task force to see if my evidence was worth anything to them. When the officer asked whom it was regarding, I told them I couldn't disclose that information. I was smarter than that. No, I needed a little extra time to set up my case against Giorgio. I had several hours of time to kill before I needed to check up on Alice and had nothing to do. Instead of going to the hospital to spy on Sierra, I went to a little flower shop and picked out a bouquet to be sent to the nurse's station. Inside the card, I wrote, "Love, your secret admirer." Finally, I called my dad and told him about everything that had happened over the past month. He was obviously worried, but he sounded a little relieved that his service to Giorgio would soon be over. I told him to pack a few bags and leave the rest to me. I was going to right the wrong done by Giorgio D'Angelo. Blown cover. Sierra. Most days, I kept my phone in my locker because I just didn't have enough time in the day to answer any calls or messages. Today was different, though. When there's a chance you'll have to grab your bags and drive to the airport at a moment's notice, You have to stay informed. During my break between shifts, I wrote a letter to Felicity explaining as much as I could. In the letter, I told her that if I suddenly disappeared with my mom, not to go looking for me. Once I was safe, I'd send word back to her. But for my own protection, no one could know where I was going. I gave her instructions for telling the hospital about my resignation, and if anyone asked, I took some time off to travel the world. I was devastated that I had to leave Felicity behind without a proper explanation. She had always been such a good friend to me, and I was leaving her in the city with Kara. I had a lot of good times with Kara, but once I started to suspect her working for my father, we weren't as close as we used to be. Silence from my phone was good, as far as I was concerned. If Apollo called, it was because something terrible happened, and we'd have to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, I could just focus on my work and count down the days until we were out of this place. 44-year-old woman suspected alcohol poisoning, a nurse called to the front desk. I rushed to the door to assist the paramedics. We found her alone in her home. Someone called it in, but there was no one else there by the time we arrived, the paramedic said. Her heart rate is stable, but we're having a hard time getting her to wake up. It took me a moment to realize whose eyes I was shining a light into. Oh my God, I gasped. That's my mom. Do you want me to handle this? Another nurse said, stepping forward. I nodded, feeling weak at the knees. You better come along anyway, the older nurse said. If it gets too much for you, you can sit outside. It's a slow night tonight anyway. I dragged my feet behind the stretcher, following them back into the examination room. Does your mother have a history of alcohol abuse? The physician asked. I guess, I cried. I just found out about it recently. I thought she would stop. We're going to need to pump her stomach, the physician said to the other nurse. I had performed these procedures before, but it was so much worse when someone you knew was the patient. Usually these things never fazed me, but I was starting to feel a little queasy. I left the examination room to get a little air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Hello? Sierra, Apollo's voice said. Is your mom there? She's having her stomach pumped as we speak, I cried. Did you know about this? Who do you think called it in? It's all part of the plan. What the hell are you talking about? I shrieked, running toward the nearest empty closet to have a little privacy. She's really sick. Your mother and I discussed this earlier today. We needed her to be in a safe place to get the heat off of her. If your dad gets a tip tomorrow that someone came into the police station and ratted him out, he's not going to suspect your mom if she's been in the hospital, will he? Also, under the careful cover of doctors and nurses, it's not like someone can just come in and shoot her without causing a scene. That's not your dad's style. He'll wait until his subject is alone, every time. My mother agreed to poison herself in order to advance your cause? I was mad. They both knew how seriously ill she could get. Our cause, Sierra. She'll be fine. She's going to feel pretty bad for a day or two, but then we'll be getting on a plane to Greece. I don't know if she should be flying so soon after an overdose. She'll be with a nurse. It will be fine. I'm sure her case is pretty mild as far as hospitalizations for this sort of thing go, but we're going to need your assistance. What could I possibly do? I hissed. You want me to drug her or something? Just make sure she isn't discharged too soon. Your mom is pretty healthy, but she needs to stay in the hospital long enough to be safe. If she can be discharged shortly before we leave, that would be good. I'll see what I can do. Good. Things are going according to plan, he said, sounding way too cheery for my liking. I'm glad we're getting closer to getting out of here, but I'm mad at both of you right now, I said. I'm sorry, he said. I promise to make it up to you. Is that what the flowers were for? What? He asked, sounding confused. Oh no, that was just because I wanted you to have something nice. My scowl subsided. Please tell me that your plan doesn't have any more dangerous stunts. I have a meeting with the police tomorrow. Then we're out of here. Promise? Promise. I hung up the phone and walked back toward my mother's room. By now, I assumed she was on IV fluids, being monitored closely. "What's going on?" Kara asked me as I jogged down the hall. She must have seen me exit the closet empty-handed. I thought about telling her a lie, but I was too annoyed at everyone to fib. "My mom drank too much, and now she's having her stomach pumped," I said flatly. "Holy shit!" she gasped. "Are you okay?" "No, Kara, I'm really not. But if you want to help out, you can go ahead and let my dad know that his wife is in the hospital. How much will he pay you for that information, Kara?" Her face turned white. In contrast, mine was red hot. "How?" she squeaked. I had my suspicions for a while now. It was just too coincidental that he knew things that only you and Felicity would know. "I'm so sorry, Sierra," she cried. "I needed the money so badly. I had so much debt from school, and I never thought I'd get out of it. When he came to me, I was so desperate. I had no choice." "I get it," I sighed. "It just sucks that you could only be my friend because my dad was paying you to. I hope it was worth it." "I don't know if it was." "It doesn't even matter now," I said, feeling exhausted. "But if Felicity asks you why things are weird, I want you to tell her." She nodded sulkily. "Okay." Kara walked in the opposite direction, probably to report to my father, while I ran back to my mom. Even though neither my mom nor Apollo seemed very concerned about overdosing to become hospitalized, I was. I had seen firsthand what too much alcohol could do to a person. I needed my mom to be there for me, not in a self-induced coma. Bust. Sierra. I stayed up all night holding my mom's hand. Even though my shift ended about 2 hours after she had been admitted, I stayed at the hospital, still wearing my scrubs. The on-duty nurses loved me being there because that gave them one less patient to worry about. This also worked in my favor because I got more privacy with my mom. "You know, you could have faked some symptoms," I said sternly when she woke up. "Sierra," she said in a raspy voice, "what happened?" "I should be asking you the very same thing. Apollo told me about your little collusion." "He's a good guy," she said. "I hope things work out for you." I squeezed her hand. Her approval meant a lot to me. "Why did you guys plan this without me? I could have found a safer way to get you hospitalized." "Because we both knew you're too caring, and you would have talked us out of it. If it's going to fool Giorgio, it has to be authentic. That man sees through everything. You scared the shit out of me. I'm sorry. It'll be worth it." That's what Apollo said too. "He's a smart guy. You should trust him." I did. I just didn't like to be kept in the dark, even if it's for the good of the plan. "Did you know that I knew his father?" He briefly mentioned something about it to me. Thinking about my mother being with anyone else made me feel uncomfortable. "It was nothing, but Stefano was a good man. He was poor, and my parents didn't like him because of it. In the end, I went with Giorgio. I wonder how things would be different now." I thought about it for a second before wincing. That would make Apollo and me half siblings. "So," my mom said, changing the subject, "how bad did I look when I came in?" "Absolutely terrible," I shuddered. "They had to pump your stomach. You're going to be on IV fluids for a while." "I feel terrible," she cackled. "It's like having 100 hangovers. At least I had a good time before I blacked out." "I'm worried that it was too easy for you to drink all of that. I saw you the night that Dad brought Apollo over. You were pretty wasted." "If we get to Greece and it's still an issue, I'll go to treatment. But I have a strong feeling that once I'm away from your father, I won't feel the need to drink anymore." "Really?" She nodded. "I already feel like I could go for quite some time without looking at a bottle of wine." "You better. If you drink in this condition, your liver will go to shit." "It probably is already. Learn from my mistakes, Sierra. If your man makes you want to drink, ditch him." "I don't think you'll have that problem with Apollo, though." "I hope not." "Oh," she said, suddenly perking up, "that reminds me. You need to call Apollo and tell him that everything is in place. What's in place? Let's just say that I took all of your father's hidden treasures and placed them in easy-to-find places around the house. I smiled. What kinds of things? Oh, cash, drugs, weapons, the whole lot. Apollo has a big stack of files that could probably put him away for 20 years alone. There will be so many charges up against him, even Giorgio won't have the connections to get out of it. Is this really going to work? Call Apollo. Tell him that it's ready. I dialed his number, excited to hear his voice. I knew he was going to be happy with my news, and I loved to make him happy. I can't talk now, Apollo said quietly when he picked up the phone. I'm with my mom, I said quickly, not knowing who was listening. She said everything's all right. Excellent, he said, understanding my code. I'll talk to you as soon as I can. I think he's at the police station, I said to my mom as she checked out her face in her compact. Good. We won't have much time left to wait. Help me put a little bronzer on so the doctors think I'm getting better. I laughed at my mother's vanity. Even in the hospital, I knew that she cared how she looked around the young doctors and nurses. I brushed a tiny amount of bronze powder on her cheeks, making her look slightly healthier, but not like she was going out for a night on the town. After admiring my handiwork, I sat down in the hard chair next to the hospital bed. I flipped through my wallet, making sure I had enough cash to cover my basic needs once I got to Athens. What are you doing? My mom asked after a few minutes of twiddling my thumbs. It's my day off, I said. I'm going to stay with you. Grab your bags and put them in your car. If your dad turns up here, he's going to ask questions, and you're not a good liar. Go. I hesitated to leave. If my dad showed up at the hospital, I didn't want my mom to be alone, but she seemed confident about her decision, grabbed her chart, and scrawled a few notes down. The patient is a potential victim of domestic violence. If husband shows up, call daughter before discharging. Then I wrote my phone number, hoping that this would prevent my dad from taking my mom with him, if Kara indeed reported back to him. On my way out, I looked around at the place I called home for the last month. I loved the hospital, and I wasn't ready to leave. I hoped wherever I called home with Apollo, I'd find a place to work that was just as rewarding as this place. Jailed. Apollo. When I hung up the phone with Sierra, I let out a sigh of relief. I knew that messing with Alice's health would be a huge risk, but thankfully, she was fine. I just hoped that Giorgio wouldn't go to her before we got her out of the hospital. Being back at the police station made me nervous. I had been at this particular precinct a few times in my younger years, just for general mischief, nothing serious. Still, after my stint in prison, any type of law enforcement officials put me on edge. I tried to remind myself that I was doing the right thing. In prison, a rat is the worst thing you can be. A rat will be tortured or even killed, even by inmates that had nothing to do with the case. If for some reason I went down for anything, as I knew Giorgio was capable of doing, I wouldn't survive prison. That's one reason why the top boss never went down. My father was horribly mistreated for years for a stupid reason, yet he never sought revenge. It wasn't because he didn't have it in him, but he grew up in a gang. If things went differently, he could have been on top. But because someone with a little more power held a grudge, he was nearly sent to jail. That's why my dad wasn't happy when I told him I wanted to kill Giorgio. He told me that it was a terrible idea. I knew he was right, but I wanted to try anyway. He told me it was better for me to leave town and stay away from Giorgio. Instead, I went straight for him. Still, he understood why I wanted to end him, and respected that. I was an adult now. I did my time like a man, and I came out of prison a different person. I was older and wiser now. The detective assigned to my case was a young blonde guy who didn't look much older than me. His partner was older, had a deeply lined face and a bushy mustache that made him look gruff. "I'm Detective Daniels," the young cop said, "and this is my partner, Detective Duff. I understand you have some information on gang activity. Is this a gang you're currently affiliated with? I paused. If I admitted it, would I go back to jail? Technically, I was on the payroll. If I lied, it wouldn't sound legitimate. Depending on your affiliation, there is a chance you can receive immunity, especially if you testify at trial if there is one. I can't stick around for a trial, I chuckled. If you knew what kind of information I was sitting on, you'd understand why I have to leave town. Okay then, Detective Duff said, sitting backward in his chair. Who are we dealing with here? Giorgio D'Angelo. The detective's jaws dropped. Do you understand why I can't stick around? Tell me what you know about him. Are you involved in his gang? Only because I wanted to take him down. He got me arrested for a crime I didn't commit. I spent time inside because of him. I wanted to return the favor and maybe get some scum off the street in the process. So this is for revenge? I balled up my fists. His family is in danger if he stays free. His family? He beats his wife. He has people spying on his daughter at all moments of the day. He tortures and kills innocent people all the time. Is it so hard to believe that it's the right thing to put this guy away for good? They looked at each other and then back to me. No, we believe you. What do you know about his crimes? Anything in particular that can be used as evidence? I set the folder of documents on the table and slid it toward the detectives. I waited for them to flip through the pages. The further they got, the more excited their faces became. I knew that I had done well. Do you understand what these documents mean? Daniels asked in a condescending tone. Yes, I said pertly. I believe this means that Mr. D'Angelo owns the government millions of dollars in unpaid taxes. Also, it shows that he has been involved in illegal gambling rings and foreign drug cartels. I'm sure there's much more in there, but I'm no expert on the subject. They stared at me, realizing they'd underestimated me from the moment I walked in the door. By now, I figured they'd listen to whatever I had to say. I don't know much about the business, but I personally know that he conducts most of his business in New York and Las Vegas. He doesn't technically own the casinos out there, but he has a hand in all of it. If he doesn't like how an owner is using his money or services, he sends one of his goons to rough him up. He is dangerous and violent, but he gets off the hook every time because he has a lot of connections and money. What kind of connections? I cleared my throat, not wanting to tell them something they didn't want to hear. Police connections? Daniels guessed. Yup. In most cases, they'll make an arrest, usually someone who's on the bottom tiers of the organization. That's how I got caught up in it. What do we want to do? Daniels said to Duff. I think we need to get a search warrant for the D'Angelo home. This is bigger than us. We need to get the feds on the line immediately. Grab anyone who's not working on an active case. We're going to need all hands on deck. Can I ask you something? I said quietly. Sure, kid, Duff grunted. Does this mean that I'm immune for getting caught up in this? I have a feeling that whatever you find in your investigation will lead to the arrest of everyone in the inner circle. Will my father and I be safe? I only came to you because I want to protect my family. I have a child on the way. I need to put this all in the past. They looked at each other, somewhat telepathically, coming to a conclusion. You're safe. We won't press charges against you or your father. Also, just out of curiosity, but if you find this information to be valid, will you be making an arrest immediately? We can't tell you that, Daniel said, but you've been very helpful. He's dangerous, I said. I promise you, if you don't get him put away for a long time, he will hurt anyone who stands in his way. I want to make sure you understand that. The detectives looked a little confused and nervous. We get it, kid, Duff said. Mob bosses are usually dangerous. You can leave this up to us now. We can handle it from here. So I can go? He gestured toward the door. I hope you're right about all of this, Apollo, Daniel said, holding the door open behind me. It would be a big win for the city to get him off the streets. You've been a big help. No matter what happens, you've done a good thing. As I walked outside of the police station, I carried those words with me. I didn't care about the cops and the big promotions they'd get for catching one of the city's biggest criminals. I didn't really care about the stories that would be plastered all over the newspapers because of my information. It was personal. This felt better than revenge. This felt like true justice. I got into my borrowed car and drove away, knowing that there was nothing more I could do but wait. A long wait. Apollo. On my way to the airport, one of my prison contacts, Wolfie, called me. I can't talk now. I have something important going on right now, I said quickly. I was expecting to hear from Sierra and Alice. I wasn't sure if Alice had been released from the hospital yet, and we only had a few hours until our flight was supposed to leave. You're going to want to hear this, Apollo, Wolfie said. Giorgio's been arrested. Once he gets booked, he'll post bail, but you need to watch your ass. Word is, he thinks that you and his wife are behind all of this, and he has people looking for you. Tell his guys that I'm driving to Los Angeles, I said, hoping someone would be dumb enough to buy it. I'm not touching this situation, man. I'll tell you whatever is happening, but I'm not going to meddle around in this. It's too dangerous. Come on, Wolfie, help me out here. I looked in my rearview window, suddenly very suspicious of every car on the road. All I know is that wherever you are, you need to get the hell out of the city. There are eyes out for you everywhere. The same goes for the wife. Are you with her? Not currently, no, I said, scanning the road. That's probably for the best. I heard that the boss has very specific instructions for what to do with her. My stomach churned. I didn't want to know what that meant. Hearing that only reinforced my belief that I did a good thing. So what should I do? I'm trying to get out of town as we speak. Keep your head on a swivel, man. Just keep me updated if you hear anything else. Will do. After I got off the phone with Wolfie, I pulled over to a gas station to fill up. I paid the attendant and went into the bathroom to relieve myself before I finished my drive. With all of my nerves flowing through my body, I really had to pee. I started to feel paranoid, so I checked all of the stalls. I was all alone. I went to the urinal and unzipped my pants when a man walked in. He was short but stocky and was wearing a leather jacket. Something about this man made me feel uneasy, so I zipped up and walked toward the door. Are you Apollo Nano? The man said. At the sound of my name, I instinctively turned around. That was my mistake. Identifying his target, the man took a swing at me, then collided with my chest. It winded me, and I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. I saw him wind up for the second punch, so I ducked, and his hand smashed into the metal door. He muffled a scream as he cradled his broken hand in his free hand, giving me enough time to go on the defensive. A kick to the stomach knocked him down, and a second kick to his head rendered him unconscious. I quickly checked his pulse afterward to make sure he was still alive. It shouldn't have mattered to me since he would have tried to kill me, but it did. If I wasn't going to kill Giorgio, I wasn't going to kill anyone. Fortunately, he was just unconscious. I washed the blood off my knuckles and booked it out of the bathroom back to my car. I was pretty shaken up, so I sped the rest of the way to the airport. I parked the car in the middle of a lot, unlocked with the keys inside. It wasn't of any use to me anymore. Bringing along my only bag of possessions, I walked briskly toward the airport's international terminal, constantly looking back and forth in case some other psycho came running after me. I held my breath as I let the airline attendant scan the passport that I got before I went to prison. I was finally going to be able to travel. For some reason, I thought the employee would recognize who I was and would tip Giorgio off. Like I said, I was feeling really paranoid. I got through to our scheduled gate after standing in lines, waiting to check my bag and get through security. Each time, I wondered if Giorgio had plants in the airport looking for us. Finally, I saw the person I had been waiting to see all day. She must have been looking for me too, because once I stepped into her eye line, she came running for me. I was so scared, she said, wrapping her arms around my neck. I embraced her waist, pulling her in close. I was scared too, I said, kissing her on the head. I'm so glad you're here. Alice walked over to us, a proud smile on her face. I hadn't asked, but it seemed like she approved of us. At the very least, she wasn't actively trying to keep us apart. I have some bad news, I said tersely. One of my contacts called me a little bit ago and said that Giorgio has men looking for us. Well, I said, looking at their shocked expressions, looking for Alice and me. As far as I know, he doesn't know that Sierra has anything to do with this. Sierra grasped my hand. Do you think there's anyone here? I don't know. I got attacked by a guy in a gas station not too far away from the apartment. I knocked him out, though, so we won't be telling anyone about it anytime soon. She grasped my hand even tighter. I heard her phone vibrate in her pocket. It's him, she said, a look of pure panic on her face. What do I do? Answer it. Make something up. Don't tell him we're with you. Just play dumb about the whole thing. He already knows that we're involved, so you need to pretend to be innocent. She took a deep breath and answered the phone, walking around to find a quiet spot to speak. Alice and I followed close behind, trying to listen to every word. Hi, Daddy, she said cheerfully. Are you back from your trip? Darling, where are you? Have you seen your mom or Apollo anywhere? It's my day off, Dad. I was feeling stressed, so I went to the spa for a few hours to relax. Mom is still at the hospital, but is going to be discharged soon. I don't know where Apollo is, but I told him to leave me alone while I'm trying to relax. He's probably back at the apartment you put him up in. We heard silence on the other end. Sierra looked at us with wild eyes. I nodded at her reassuringly. She was doing a great job. I think you should come home, Sierra, he said. Why? Is everything all right? No, it's not. Your whore of a mother has joined up with your bodyguard in a petty attempt to hurt me. They've made up all sorts of nasty lies about the both of us to the police, and I need you to get home so we can talk with the lawyer. I'm not really surprised that this is happening. Alice was never a good wife, and I knew I should have never trusted that rat Apollo. I grinned when I heard this. He was right about one thing. Okay, I'll leave now. I'll see you soon. See you soon, Sierra. If the cops try to talk to you, tell them you need your lawyer. Don't talk to anyone until you talk to me. Okay, Dad. Bye. She looked at us with the beginnings of a smile on her face. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in a few days, but beautiful nonetheless. Did you hear all of that? Yeah, he's going to be waiting for a long time for you to come home, I said, pulling her in for a hug. In the remaining hour before our flight took off, we sat on the floor in the terminal, talking about everything from our childhoods to our future goals. If we were going to spend the rest of our lives together in one way or another, we needed to learn everything about the other. I had never gotten so close to anyone before, but I found that it was easy to open up to someone that I trusted. We had been through so much already, so any uncertainties in the future seemed manageable. Once we got on the plane and watched the city disappear below us, I knew that we would be just fine. Sierra and I had managed to dethrone the mob boss, and no one could hurt us now. Epilogue. Taking care of the baby, Sierra. Despite our whirlwind of a romance, eventually things settled down in Greece. Using the money from my trust fund, I bought Apollo and myself a small villa on the coast. It seemed that in all of the chaos surrounding my father's arrest, no one thought to secure his accounts with my name on them. It was no surprise when he was convicted for a whole list of crimes and was sentenced to a prison for 50 years. When you think about everything he was busted for, he got off relatively easy. Eventually, the money would run dry, so it was time to find a job. After a little searching, I found a small hospital that was in need of nurses. I took language classes during the day and worked nights until my pregnancy made it too hard to keep up. But it wasn't long before I had my Greek nursing license. About 7 months after we arrived in Greece, I gave birth to our daughter, Luna. Apollo and I were terrified that we would ruin something so perfect and precious. But after a few weeks, we got the hang of being parents. I loved to watch Apollo take care of her. He had such a tough exterior, but on the inside, he was surprisingly warm and nurturing. After I had the baby, it was so hard for me to go back to work. All I wanted to do all day was hold Luna and watch her sleep. My mom helped out a lot too, but I still hated the thought of having to leave her with a babysitter from time to time. I didn't want my mom to feel like she was my unpaid nanny, especially when she wanted to travel around Europe. Apollo really stepped up and quit his job at the motorcycle shop to take care of Luna full time. That way, I could see my patients and fulfill my dreams of being a nurse. My mom had a lot of money of her own and really wanted to do something with it. She felt like when she was with my dad, she didn't put it to good use enough. She felt like she wasted so many years sitting around the house or blowing her extra cash on shoes and purses. She wanted to give back to our new little community in Greece that had accepted us. After a lot of thought, we decided to open up a free clinic in a poor neighborhood. My mother was great at organizing events, so she held numerous fundraisers and events to get the town behind our cause. After about a year, we had enough help to make our dream a reality. I spent half of my work week at the free clinic as a volunteer, taking care of people who wouldn't ordinarily have access to health care. It was a lot of hard work, but it was worth it. In the end, to see how happy and healthy people were, just because of what we did. In fact, our first clinic went so well that we have plans to start more clinics in different places. Before long, my mom will probably move to another town, just to branch out and start her own life. Of course, she'll never be so far that she won't be able to visit us. Apollo and I are at the point where we have things covered at home. When it was time for Apollo's parents to come over, his mother decided that she didn't want to leave. She had grown quite accustomed to her life in New Jersey and didn't want to give it up for a life on the run. Stefano, on the other hand, was at risk if he didn't, so they decided to split up. It was sad but amicable, and the two are still friends. While I was pregnant, my ditzy pregnancy brain forgot that my mother and Apollo's father had a fling before, so I suggested that they spend some time together, thinking that they could use each other's company. Of course, this led to something more, and they rekindled their lost romance. Apollo and I absolutely hated the idea at first, but once we saw how happy they were, we couldn't keep them apart. Our only request was that they could never marry, because we couldn't bear the thought of being step-siblings. However, Apollo and I got married when Luna was about a year old. It was a beautiful ceremony on the beach, and one of the best days of my life. We spent the evening drinking, dancing, and looking out over the water, talking about all of our future plans. We were dreamers, but I knew that there was nothing we couldn't do. Well, we could do anything except for keeping our hands off each other. A few hours into our marriage, I got pregnant with our second child. I thought Apollo would be nervous, like the first time I told him about Luna, but he was over the moon. He picked me up and swung me around before remembering how bad my morning sickness was with Luna. Then I saw him cry happy tears that appeared so rarely. Without a doubt, I knew that I had made the right choice when I saw him in that tattoo parlor in Las Vegas. Apollo was everything I never knew I needed in my life. I saved him from a life of crime, and he saved me from a life of loneliness. We're about as opposite as people get, but together, we make a good team. The end. This has been Deadly Ink, a dark mafia romance, Omerta Series Book 3, written by Roxy Sinclaire, narrated by Holly Holt, copyright 2017 by Roxy Sinclaire, production copyright 2018 by Roxy Sinclaire.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.